What's it like dating a sociopath? I had a friend who married one. There were no warning signs. From my perspective, he was genuinely a decent guy. Had a sales job, and I do sales, so we got along. Then it was seriously the night of the wedding he got really controlling. It was like a light switch flipped. They went on their honeymoon the next week, and she called me halfway through thinking she had made a mistake. She said he just picked at her for saying the wrong thing, and his idea of the future made her sound like a slave. I didn't think too much about it. A lot of people have fights on their honeymoon. She got pregnant like a month into it. Then he moved her back east so they could live with his mum, even though he was supposed to be making a lot of money. She quit calling me much after the wedding. I assumed it was a newlywed plus baby planning thing, so I didn't think too much about it. Then we noticeably drifted, and I didn't know until years later that it was because he got mad whenever she talked to other people. So yeah. He moved her out of state, got her pregnant, and had 2 other families on the side. She finally got out of it, messed her up for a long time. A friend of mine dated a diagnosed sociopath and said it was frustrating because there wasn't any logic behind her attraction to him. She realized he wasn't good to her, but she couldn't stop going back to him. She described him as both the best thing and worst thing in her life when she was with him. Oh, he was a classic, into animal torture and stuff like that. The way he got to talking endlessly about animal torture was by pretending he felt bad for it and looking for sympathy. Like, I can't believe I did that. I feel so bad. He kept mentioning it so much. He thought it was funny when me or the baby had pain. At one point, he told me that it was so long ago that by now I should also think it was funny that he had gotten my blood and my pieces of flesh on him. He said that me having empathy was proof that I was mentally ill because empathy doesn't exist. You just learn in your teens that there's consequences for being bad to other people. He also said that nobody cares about women, they're like steak in the supermarket, and that when he saw a woman in the streets, he thought about committing the unspeakable act. He is incredibly charismatic, and the police said that I made a false report. He's still getting back at me for leaving through the legal system. My lord. If any of our viewers have ever dated someone like this, you have my deepest sympathy because it sounds truly horrific. And those of us who have yet to hit the sociopath in our dating lives can thank our lucky stars. Disclaimer, I am not nor have I ever been in a romantic relationship with my brother. I misread the post. However, I have lived with my sociopath brother and can relay why it would probably be a nightmare to date someone like him. He's my twin. Things happened when we were little, I couldn't have linked up then, but I most certainly do now. As twins, we obviously got 2 of everything. He'd destroy his, take mine and then say I destroyed mine to get his thing because it was better somehow. He hugged the family cat so hard it panted when he let it go. Every time. Once, he mysteriously found the cat with a broken leg and decided not to tell Mum. He was just constantly trying to cause chaos, pinning everyone in the house against each other. He'd start arguments, seemingly for the fun of it, and he'd always find a way to slip into the background while we screamed at each other. His worst offense was when he cut himself on the leg with a razor and told Mum and Dad I'd made him do it. My parents nearly got divorced because of him. Then they later got divorced for other reasons. He told me a while later that he lied about everything. He liked doing that, messing things up and only telling me. I was branded as a liar for most of my childhood and no one really trusted anything I said because of him, so he took all the more delight in confiding in me because he knew what it would do. He lives with my dad now and I haven't spoken to him in 4 years. But I do have a fun story if people ask who the evil twin is, I guess. I dated one and it was traumatizing. I felt like I was losing my mind from the casual cruelty and gaslighting. Took forever for me to trust obvious truths again, since he was so skilled at maliciously twisting them. 0.03 out of 10 I would not recommend. Yes, he admitted his diagnosis proudly, at least to me. He was very troubled. I was only with him 8 months, but those 8 months were the worst of my life. He seemed happy to discover I didn't have stable housing. He asked if I'd like to move in. I said no, so he started causing problems with the people I was crashing with. I didn't realize this until later that he was the one who got me kicked out. Once I had no choice but to stay with him, the hotels, or the streets, he laughed and said he's breaking his lease. Maybe if I'd done what he said faster, I'd be able to stay. But that I could sleep in his basement if I liked? He'd do weird crap like that. Make me wait outside of bars, his jobs, his friends' houses. It was this whole thing he'd make me do, especially if the weather was poor. When he drank, it was worse. I'd sleep in the bathroom if he was on the sauce to get away from him. If I didn't, he'd attack me when he blacked out. He's wanted for murder in another country now. No clue where he is, but I'll randomly get contacted by him. It's been years, but he still does it. All he says is, "I love you." Once he got into my email and changed my name to "I love you," I know 100% that it's him. I've seen and been through a lot of messed up stuff in my life. It is what it is. But that man takes the frickin' cake for the most awful experiences in my entire life. There are people I meet or see on TV that have the exact look in their eyes or voice pattern as him, despite looking nothing like him. I avoid those people like the plague or sprint to turn the TV off when they appear. It's like they over-enunciate certain points of words yet have a monotone voice. The latter especially. It's like they're parroting a human and they're not actually one. One thing he always did was watch YouTube videos and practice in the mirror on how to look happy, sad, or concerned. It was insane. Everyone thought he was the greatest guy on earth. His mother tried to warn me that he'd kill me. It was messed up. Yes, I dated a narcissistic sociopath. It was terrible. It left permanent scars. It took time, but I now realize that everything was a lie. Well, his name was correct, but what he thought, felt, did, his plans and his history, I knew none of those things. He's a complete stranger and I never knew him at all. I'm doing fine now, although once in a while I'll stop and shake my head because I feel so goddamn dumb. I don't imagine that it's common for sociopaths to get diagnosed as such. They tend to live in denial. They don't think they have issues worth exploring. Yes, I dated one and it was the worst experience of my life. By the time it was over, multiple years, I had no idea who he was. That's what it was like. This is very true. Why would someone who has as little regard as we've seen in some of these stories ever care enough about how much damage they do to take the first steps to treatment? Do any of our commenters know of stories of people like this bettering themselves? Sound off. There wasn't any diagnosis, but I was casually with a guy who was sending up some pretty serious red flags, and it suddenly clicked that he was a sociopath. No empathy, would absolutely lie to people's faces, huge plans that went nowhere, nothing was ever his fault, rules were for other people. When I drifted away from him or hung out with someone else, he'd start putting lots of effort in again. And of course, there was cheating, lying, among other things. Luckily for me, I'd recognized it early, and I realized I needed to be careful about how I went about detaching myself from him. So here's what I did, and hopefully it can help someone. I never actually broke things off with him or told him we were done. Obviously, this only works if you're casual, but maybe some variation of it could work. So an example would be that when he asked me for something, I knew he wanted it right then and there. So whenever he contacted me to ask for it, I'd say, "Sure, that sounds great. I get off work in 3 hours and I'll come over with it right after that." He'd say, "No, never mind." I'd act like I was disappointed about it, so he thought he had successfully punished me. He thought that I was still on the hook. I'd do this over and over until he stopped thinking of me as someone he could get things from. It took a while and a lot of acting upset when he'd berate me or snap at me. I specifically remember sitting in his room while he yelled at me about where I put my purse down, thinking, "Okay, remember Vi, this is very upsetting, looks sad." But it did work without him going to any extremes, and we lived in the same building, so it was hard to just avoid him altogether. Obviously, your mileage may vary. Yep, by far the hardest experience of my life. I was with him for nearly a year, 6 years ago. Still working on recovery today. Tried to separate me from my friends and family, made me feel responsible for him emotionally and financially. One of the first things he did after about a week of dating was convince me to pay for his $400 phone bill so he could have his phone switched back on and stay in contact with me. That was only the beginning. I lost all of my self-worth. By the end, I felt completely crazy. It's insane what prolonged exposure to gaslighting will do to a person. I ended up dropping out of uni because he would sabotage me at every turn. I'll never forget when I was working on a major project and he'd keep walking past me calling me a fricking B-word and spitting on my piece. I was the only one working, and supporting 2 people on a crap hospitality wage is hard enough, and then adding in about $300 a week of a green herb addiction. If he didn't have that stuff, he'd lose his crap. He'd throw things, smash things. It was safer for me to keep him dosed up, and in turn, I smoked a crap load to escape the reality of the situation. I finally got out when I found out that he had working girls in the house and in my bed. I finally opened up to my friends what had been happening, and they got me out of there. It was messed up, but I tried to see it in a positive light. I've learned and gained massive self-esteem since this happened, and I find I can easily detect sociopathic and narcissistic personalities, not people now. I still get super triggered by things, especially guys yelling or showing aggression. I still get annoyed at myself for breaking down in these situations, but each time it happens, I feel myself heal just a little bit. I see it as a wound reopening, but then the scar tissue builds up, making me stronger each time. Sorry for such a long rant. Seeing this question hit me, and it feels good to get a bit of stuff off my chest. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was married to one. It was awful. We had a child and he cheated while I was pregnant with a woman I specifically said, "I don't trust her, please avoid being alone with her too," when she joined my group. Other friends basically invited her in. He was verbally and mentally awful. He told me no one would want me because I was a young single mum, so I may as well come home and just let him cheat with whoever he felt like cheating with. I moved across the country to escape his insanity. The best way I learned to deal with him is to ignore him and not give a crap. It messed with his ego big time. He really doesn't know how to deal with someone who actually gives zero shots about him. He'd try to tell me about whatever was going on in his life and I'd say, "Why are you telling me this? I don't care. Don't speak to me unless it's about your son." He kidnapped my child during one of the visits. Because our divorce was final in our home state, nothing could be done. It took me 2 years of fighting to win full sole custody of my son, who's now grown and doesn't have much to do with his dad. There's of course a lot more to the story. Psychological warfare and such. He tried to make me think I was going crazy when I started to become suspicious. He tried to torture me for 18 years. I haven't spoken to him in 5 years and I feel free. He's been told that if he so much as tries to speak to me at events for my son, like graduation, college graduation, military basic training graduation, that I'll walk away. I have nothing to say to the man and he has nothing of worth to say to me. My son learned on his own what kind of person his dad is and is remarkably well-adjusted and full of empathy. Traumatic. I'm in therapy, but I'm scared of people now. I don't know if I want to get married or have kids. I beat myself up for it because there were so many signs that he was that way. But I still wanted him. Even a few years after we first broke up, I ended up catching herpes. He never cared about me and only cared about himself. He used me. I got really mad at myself when I think about it. Even typing this out, my anxiety is slightly hitting me. I learned that I was in love with the idea of being in love and that my self-esteem was low. It's probably going to be a long time before I trust people again. One of my biggest fears is falling into it again. And even worse, not leaving. I'm thankful that I have friends and family that help me. I don't feel alone. I feel love all the time. One thing that's been very telling in these stories has not just been of the hard, scary times these people go through during dating these people, but the seemingly long-lasting damage to their victims' self-esteem and future relationships. I really have no words. My first boyfriend told me on our first date that he was a sociopath and, "I don't feel anything, but I sure know I like you." And because I was 16 and naive, I completely fell for it. Q being manipulated into doing the deed, telling him I struggled with my relationship with food and body image only to be told I was flabby afterwards, and all the exhausting mind games. Even through all of that and more, I still utterly adored him and repressed all of my instinctual feelings that were telling me to leave. Something I still feel dumb about. I honestly think I was just a toy for him to manipulate and hurt, something he made sure to tell me about after our relationship ended. The way his face would change from loving to like someone I didn't know was kind of terrifying, really. It all messed me up pretty badly, and I still find it hard to trust people. Yes, I dated one briefly, and she nearly ruined my life. I broke up with her when I realized she was mentally unstable after about 5 dates. 6 months later, I was coming home from a party when I found her waiting half undressed in my lobby, asking to please come upstairs. I let her, she disrobed, refused to leave, threatened to smash my things, and when I removed her from the apartment, accused me of attacking her. I was arrested, lost a job I was about to start, and lost 6 months in savings. The night before the hearing, she called me. I was smart enough not to pick up, and the voicemail convinced the prosecutor to drop the case. 3 years later, I got a call from someone claiming to be her husband. She'd tried the same thing with him, but he had been dumb enough to marry her, and then dumb enough to pick up the phone after she had accused him. He ended up facing felony charges, lost his medical license, and paid half the value of his home to get rid of her. She'd also apparently attacked his kids, while he had been restrained from being in his own home of 20 years based on her accusations and their 4-week marriage. Clinical psych grad student here. There's going to be a lot of sensationalized responses on here that paint a picture of sociopaths, which is either antisocial personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, that is violent and demented. The reality is that sociopaths, just like mentally healthy people, come in all shapes and sizes. Violent tendencies can exist, but aren't necessarily advantageous for people. Many sociopaths end up becoming successful doctors, lawyers, politicians, and most of them don't commit acts of violence or overt aggression. One caveat is that antisocial personality disorder is characterized by acts of criminal or otherwise delinquent behavior, narcissists not quite as much. And yes, I was romantically involved with a sociopath. Ultimately, being with him felt like I'd been thrown into the rapids. I felt disoriented, confused, and betrayed after every serious conversation about his treatment of me. Somehow it was my fault, or criticizing him too much. He refused to apologize and claimed that he wanted an apology for mistreatment and it was manipulation on my part. I told him once that being with him felt like he was holding me by the throat over a great precipice. I didn't want to hold on to him, but if I let go, I feared that I'd fall. He had constructed a world around me in which my reality was no longer real, in which I was never the victim but the ungrateful charity case, and in which he constantly was inventing new ways to torment me psychologically and intimidate me physically. The tumult, the rapids, were ultimately a script of rapidly oscillating states of being. He'd apologize and promise that he'd change. He'd cry and beg for me not to leave him. If I tried to make him leave, he'd pivot to threats or demean me. Everything happened on his terms, even if it didn't seem that way. Outwardly, he appeared to be a patient, kind, and charismatic partner. He was conventionally attractive, intellectually gifted, and socially adored. His views on life were reasonable and measured, and his style of rhetoric is, to this day, one of the most engaging and convincing of anyone I'd ever known. The acts of cruelty and humiliation were rare at first, growing to a crescendo during times in my life when I was the most vulnerable. I lost my best friend. The attacks escalated, then I got a new job and the attacks declined. I left my job and they escalated again. I found a new job and there we were, back to celebrating again. When he was good, he was so good. I'd start to believe that I must have been too hard on him. After all, things only got bad when I was already doing poorly, managing grief, loss, and depression. When I was succeeding, he was succeeding with me. So it seemed reasonable to me, for a while at least, that he was right when he said I was just projecting my inner turmoil onto him. I believed him for a while, but that mask just can't stay on. Eventually, things are too good for too long and he couldn't have that. He always needed to be one step ahead of me. He always needed to have the upper hand, and he always needed to use it to drag me to the edge of the abyss and hold me over while I desperately clutched and grabbed at the arm that held me, begging him not to let go. I now know that this is typical of narcissistic bad actors. I know that his moves were calculated and methodical. I know that he attacked me when I was already down because it was the easiest to manipulate my worldview during those times, and to create a dynamic in which I was so afraid to lose him amongst the other losses that I'd forgive him for whatever he'd done, even if what he'd done was slowly boring a hole into me, removing pieces of myself that I'd left defenseless to exploit. I know now that the true trap is the poison in the sugar. I know that it's the sweetness, the overtures when you're stronger that truly ensnare and contort. I know that it wasn't my fault. It had never been my fault. The red flags I'd seen from the start were warnings I should have heeded, not forgiven, and that in robbing me of myself, in repeatedly gaining and abusing my trust and affection, he was whittling me away from the inside out until I felt more like scattered debris of myself than an entire person capable of walking away when I first realized I had to. I tried to leave him 10 times. It took me 9 months after the attacks first started to get out. 6 after the first serious events started to unravel. I didn't think that sort of thing could happen to me because, well, I'd studied this sort of thing. I knew the signs academically. I was so certain I'd recognize them. I'm a strong, outspoken, and almost aggressively independent person, someone you'd think incapable of victimizing. But there it was. It happened to me. And in having it happen, I understand how truly insidious this kind of thing is. I understand why women can't or don't leave. I understand why I was so wrong to think that they were weak for not fighting or running away. If one of these people is smart, like my partner, they don't just break you down. It doesn't happen all at once. Instead, you become eroded. You're contorted and compromised so slowly that you don't realize what's happening until you've already been ensnared. He never had to lay a single hand on me to be the single worst experience of my entire life. He didn't have to hit me even once to make me afraid of him, alienated from my own body and distanced from my true sense of self. Beyond the obvious words of wisdom that I'm sure most people will impart in this thread, I'd just like to leave you with this, if you're still with me. I'll give you bitter pills and sugar coating. The pills are harmless, the poison is in the sugar. Gentlemen, what was your most embarrassing half-mast story? I was 13, being checked out for growth problems by a female doctor. She had me lay on the table while in a hospital gown. She was oldish, salt and pepper hair, large glasses. She started by listening to my breathing and examining my top half. As I felt her working her way down, I got the most awkward instant tower and apologized. She assured me it was totally normal for my age and that I shouldn't be embarrassed. She waited a few minutes for things to calm down. She went under the gown to examine the size of my stones. She lightly touched my bag and I finished on her hand. She also said it's normal and I shouldn't be embarrassed, but I straight up just wanted to die. From that point on, I tickled my pickle before any more appointments. In grade 7, there was a guy who was supposed to do his presentation before me. He was sitting beside me in class and then noticed that he was standing at attention, wearing basketball shorts too. I offered to go first to give him a moment to sort himself out. The teacher made a big deal about having to follow the order list on the board, so the guy got up, trying very unsuccessfully to hide it. The teacher's face dropped when he realized what was going on, but it was too late. The poor guy got through his presentation, but the jokes followed him around for years. The camera passed me in class while I had a random standing stone in high school. Guess who was on the school news intro rocking a stiff peak every morning for months? I was on the swim team in middle school. The team was co-ed and during practice I was standing above my crush on the diving block while she was in the pool. We were chatting a bit. She had just finished her laps and was about to dive in. I guess her swimsuit had gotten tight as she swam, so she went to pull out the top of her suit in order to loosen it. From my perspective above her, I essentially got a quick glance of her entire chest. At 13 years old, this would have been great, except she certainly noticed that I noticed. I wanted to believe that I was coy, but I really doubt it. To make matters worse, I was wearing a tight bathing suit myself. We probably just stared at each other for the longest 5 seconds of my life before I heard the coach call for me to dive into the pool and finish my laps. Needless to say, I had a bit of extra drag for my first 100-meter freestyle. The worst part was I was definitely supposed to switch to the backstroke after the first 50 yards. But my crush was still in the lane and I kind of made an executive decision not to flip over directly in front of her. I was embarrassed enough with a rudder, I definitely didn't need a sail. Generous metaphor. I feel like you could have played the Jaws music if you had decided to do the backstroke, but I can understand you not wanting to give your school that opportunity for lifelong mockery. When I was a freshman in high school, I had an Adidas windbreaker and had a raised monument. Unfortunately, my name was called next to go up in front of the class for my presentation. So real quickly, I tried the old tuck the boy up under your boxer's pants waistline seam so it's not making a tent trick. While I was giving the presentation, I used a hand movement to show something up high, which lifted my shirt up enough to where my member's tip was showing like a turtle head sticking out of a shell. The collective gasp and laughs of the room was all I needed to know that most of the class just saw my manhood. I had a friend in high school that got one and was called to the front of the class. He was wild and just announced that he was pitching a tent and couldn't stand up. Everyone laughed with him instead of at him. I had a huge crush on this chick beside me in high school my freshman year. Out of nowhere, I popped one, and wouldn't you know it, my teacher said, "Okay, I just finished grading your test and I'm going to call you up one by one to see your test scores." And I'll be darned, I was the second. Thankfully, I was in the first row, but I still had a rock-hard eggplant. So as I got up, I acted like there was something on my shoe I was trying to get off, and I made it to her desk. I then leaned on her desk and said, okay, and then as I walked back, I acted like there was still something on my shoe and sat down. Hey guys, let's walk like gorillas. Happened on my first official date. We were about to get up from our table at the restaurant and old Johnny decides to come on out of nowhere. Told her I had to reply to an important work email even though I was 15 and she knew I didn't have a job, nor was I in the process of applying to one. I just started dating this girl. We were super compatible in so many different ways. When the time finally came to do the deed, I couldn't get an ounce of blood to flow to my little buddy. Bless her heart, she tried and I pushed rope a couple of times, but never got remotely close to being solid. She was probably the most attractive woman I've ever been with, and I think my brain was too focused on performing, and the nerves got the best of me. We ended up giving up and talking about everything, laying in bed together. She started talking about one of her friends who had taken action to not be alive anymore when she was younger. And out of nowhere, Mr. Johnson decides to suddenly become both an unstoppable force and an immovable object. I attribute it to me starting to feel comfortable around her and still being really in the mood. I waited until she finished her story, said a few words and then pulled her on top and let her ride to completion. This day she still jokes about having to whisper sweet suicidal nothings in my ear to get me in the mood. Walked into the kitchen and Dad was in there. I had a solid one, he saw it and told me to go back upstairs. I was 13. My grandma had recently passed away and my entire family had to go to the funeral. My pants were really tight and you could see like everything. So during the service, this good-looking woman sat right in front of me. So when I started to feel the movement of my little sir, I got scared. Then out of nowhere, the fricking funeral conductor asks everyone to stand up. But since I had a raging extra leg, I decided to stick my bum to the seat. Now my grandma in heaven knows that I care about my member more than her. It was my sophomore year in high school. Me and a classmate, a girl, were going to do a presentation on plants for our biology class. The teacher gave us a couple of minutes to reflect on what we were going to do. He let us move around the class and sit across from each other on a table. Me and her were sitting across and she puts her legs on top of mine. She was short, kind of imagine someone putting their feet on a table while sitting. This was during the first days of May, so it was warm and everyone had summer clothing. We were both wearing shorts and she had sandals on too, so I was feeling her bare skin. I didn't necessarily have a crush on her, but I thought she was kind of hot. As she starts moving her feet around, my legs, like playing but not intentionally trying to be seductive, it happens. Thank God she didn't feel it because it was there and her feet were dangerously close to my downstairs area. The teacher called us to present, but I asked for another 3 minutes, saying we weren't ready, for obvious reasons. I did get rid of it before I presented. I wanted to tell her, but I feel like she might think it's creepy, which it probably is. Had to do the old waistband tuck right before walking out on stage for the first time as a 12-year-old in the middle of a school production of Anne of Green Gables. I know a guy who, while on tour, woke up in the van with a mid-afternoon stalagmite when they stopped at a gas station. He did the old waistband tuck to go in and grab a snack and drink. Turns out he misjudged some geometry and also his shirt didn't quite reach his waistband, so he had some helmet poking out. Following a groin injury, got an ultrasound on my junk from a cute nurse. Resistance was futile. Similar thing happened to me. Hot female technician did an ultrasound on my family jewels. Humorous now only because it turned out I didn't have cancer down there. Warm gel, attractive female. Yeah, no way to avoid it. Marine Corps Recruit Department, San Diego, in the recruit separation platoon, being sent home for medical reasons. I was 19 at the time and was sleeping in my rack, surrounded by about 40 other guys, all asleep except the fire watch. We all woke up to the usual screaming of the DI and I had a nice case of morning rigidity. First time it happened while I was there. I sat up and proceeded to immediately splooge in my shorts. These were thin, cheap fabric shorts, reminiscent of 70s basketball shorts. While everyone else hit the line, I had to quickly change and my rackmate stated the reason I wasn't online was, "Sir, Recruit Smithson was too excited to hear your voice and needed to change, sir." Oh God, well I'm sure that your colleagues were nice and understanding about the fact that these things happen and didn't make your life a living misery for the remainder of your time who am I kidding, they definitely did. I just went through the MCRD San Diego, can confirm that random morning stuff loves to show up at the worst times. Had a dude in my platoon get a rager during hygiene inspection one night. It was the hardest time of my life trying to keep my bearing, while the entire time the DI is screaming, "Put it away right now! Get it out of my sight! If light wasn't coming up so soon, I'd have you transform into Jack Black on the quarterdeck." I knew exactly what my drill instructor was talking about, so I proceeded to lose all of my crap. Not everyone understood what he meant. I was in a job interview with my current boss and 3 other people. I was doing a board test, where I work as a teacher, and a board test is when you teach a class based on random topics the interviewers give you, so they evaluate your teaching skills. During it, I got the most random full mast ever. My boss realized, and all I said was, "That was a hard one. I meant the test, that's what I was trying to say," and she couldn't keep a straight face after that. "He became your current boss? Looks like you really stood out from the other applicants." Pizza delivery. You know how awkward it is to walk up to a house holding pizza and an upright soldier? It's bad. Made it worse when the girl asked if it came with the food. This morning I was having breakfast at the Midtown Diner. The bagel was delicious and the coleslaw couldn't be finer. I got a weird look from the waitress as I asked her for the check. I looked down and realized I was inexplicably standing to attention down there. While I've had my fair share of embarrassing raised flags, the worst debacle I've ever seen happened to a kid from my school on the bus. Basically, he and his friend were standing on a cramped bus and then the bus jolted and the kid's reinforced tower slammed hard into his friend's behind, and right at that moment, the stabber let out an accidental suggestive moan. The pandemonium that followed was majestic. The friend shouted that this guy had a hard one and all the kids from my school began to chant the word for it. He had the most mortified expression on his face. It was funny as frick though. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. High school junior. I took swimming class as my gym class for that year. Without objectifying too hard, all the girls in the class were really good looking and I was a teenage male. I was particularly fond of this one girl that we will call Alexis. Teacher decides to separate us into 3-person teams and have races, where the teacher decides to call out the stroke she wants you to use as you jump in the water off the diving block. And wouldn't you know it, I got teamed with Alexis. She went first, and as we were lined up, as much as I want to say I was a gentleman, I was just fixated on her butt. Right before she dove in, she turned and said, "Try to keep up," and tossed me a wink, and that's all it took. Bathing suit rager inbound. That wasn't going away anytime soon. It was my turn on the block next. As I dove in, I heard the teacher yell, "Backstroke!" I hit the water and thought that there was no way I was swimming on my back looking like a submarine with the periscope up. I swam freestyle and figured I would play it off like I didn't hear the teacher. The entire lap I only thought about my burning lungs and Sally Jessie Raphael, the unattractive morning talk show host, to get it to go away. Even faking a leg cramp to delay getting out of the pool. Bullet dodged, but my gosh, that was a close call. You weren't on a fricking stealth mission with that one, my dude. I was in high school sitting on the bus and I had a chick that I had a crush on. She was standing, so I cracked a joke like, "Your legs seem tired, I've got a seat for you." Told her she could sit on my lap and she took the offer. Somewhere between her contemplation and her sitting, my soldier took to salute her company and, well, she introduced herself to the soldier. I had this happen when I was a cocky as frick freshman. A girl that was either a junior or a senior was complaining that she wanted to sit close to her friend, who was across the aisle, and I go, "You can sit on my lap if you want," as a joke. I would have moved if she'd asked me to move because I was a wimp. Instead, she sat on my lap, and I got real solid real quick, and she could definitely feel it. And she just sat there and chatted with her friend for the 45-minute bus ride while I turned beet red and died. So I was about 13 and somehow had an ex-girlfriend. We'd dated for 3 months, but back then it was a big deal. Anyway, we were in history together and I overheard her talking to one of her friends. She literally said, "Literally all you have to do is touch him and he'll get a rager." Hearing this, for some reason, brought me to full attention. The bell rang a minute later. So this isn't a story about me, but I am a 9th grade teacher. I teach a public speaking class and one day we were playing a game. It was a game where we were telling a story, then someone had to come along and add to the story. I called time at 1 minute, and they would have to switch with another storyteller. I noticed this boy kept pulling down his shirt and realized, holy crap, he was totally hiding one. I called time at 40 seconds. I hope no one else in the class noticed. It must be hard being a 9th grade boy. That is a lot more considerate than some teachers, and I sincerely hope that your efforts saved that young sir some serious mockery. Hats off to you. I was in algebra in high school with my crush. I remember her wearing a nice blue shirt that day before 3 things happened to me. 1, I wasn't paying attention. 2, I wasn't particularly good at math. And 3, I had a random half-mast going on, maybe caused by said crush. I got called up to the board to solve a problem. The thing wouldn't have been an issue had I continued to sit down, but the sudden motion and shifting of my whole body caused my second brain to go from 50% to 100% in the time it took me to get up to the board. So here I am facing the wall with a raging monster that I know my teacher can see, holding a marker and staring at a math problem I didn't know how to solve. Bless my teacher's heart for walking behind me and talking me through the problem until Junior calmed down and I could go back to my desk defeated and embarrassed. Not me, thankfully, and I'm not even sure if the kid was embarrassed or if he just had world-class poker face, but here we go. I was in computer class in high school and one week we had to do presentations in front of the class. The teacher did have a podium up front near his desk, but it was back and off to the side a little bit, so no one really used it. The teacher called one student up at a time, they did their speeches and then sat back down. Everything was fine until he got to Carl. Carl was one of those kids that was never really outright dirty, but he was always a bit greasy, with clothes that were left unwashed for a day or two too long. He also had a fondness for wearing his clothes from gym class for the rest of the day. When the teacher called on him, Carl stood right up from his desk and began marching to the front, with a tree trunk jutting proudly from his groin, in sweatpants, without even trying to hide it. The teacher saw it early and stopped him on the way up. "Hey, do you want to actually wait for a minute? I'll get another student to give their presentation." Carl just looked at him like, "Why would I need to do that?" and answered with a nonchalant "no," and continued his trek to the front of the classroom. After digging yourself a hole like that, most people would just cut their losses and make a beeline for the podium to give their speech and wait for things to settle down. Not Carl. Carl strode confidently to the front of the class and started giving his speech. Most of the class was either trying not to laugh, laughing, looking away, or a mixture of all three. Carl didn't care. He gave his speech in full view of everyone without missing a beat, all while sporting the kind of supremely obvious pitch a tent stick that only sweatpants can bring you, and fully ignoring it was even happening. When Carl finished his presentation, he took a little time to organize his notes in front, then walked back to his seat like nothing had happened. He was still rock hard and he still didn't care. Almost every Sunday in church from ages 12 to 18. Ugh, thin slacks and a bored mind free to wander. I was swimming in a pool with some friends, one of whom I had a crush on. I usually have a GoPro with me to document possible shenanigans. All of them decided it would be fun to get the GoPro from me, so naturally I hid it in the pocket of my swim trunks. Now, I've had a rager for the entire time this was happening, so putting it in my pocket wasn't the best idea. My crush found out where the camera was and reached into my pocket. She did not grab the camera. I pulled myself away and hoped she couldn't tell the difference between a hard member and a GoPro. Back in high school, I was sitting around talking with some friends after lunch. It was a big group of us, boys and girls. We were all just talking, BSing about whatever, and suddenly I look over and my buddy is looking at me, laughing and whispering to the girl next to him. Then she looks at me and starts laughing. I have no idea what's going on. Other people start looking across because of their commotion, and eventually everyone sitting across from me in the circle were looking at me laughing. I'm stumped. I know it's me somehow, but I don't know what they're looking at. I start checking that my hair wasn't sticking up or that I'd spilled some food on my shirt. I'm starting to panic a little bit more, and more of the group is laughing at me. It's like one of those dreams where you're in class, undressed, and everyone laughs except it isn't a dream, and I can't figure it out. Finally, I look down. Like, what the frick is going on here, and I can see it. Back then, really loose jeans were the style one wore, and mine were oversized and really loose on me. So while I didn't have a full mast, a huge fold of fabric right on the fly area was sitting up well on its own, and as far as anyone could tell, I was just sitting there talking to all my friends with a monster. Naturally, I reacted with the measured confidence of your average 15-year-old kid and panicked. I started imploring that it wasn't really what they thought it was, making them all laugh harder in disbelief. So in a fit of desperation, I decided to demonstrate as much by slapping down the fly of my jeans to flatten out the fabric to make my case. Naturally, with only a loose bit of fabric between my full-speed hand and my deflated junk, I make contact with my soft sir at full speed and proceed to give myself the mother of all package checks, which of course makes it look like I just smacked the ever-loving crap out of my raging mini-me, having the exact opposite effect that I'd intended. So now I'm falling out of my chair in near tears, 70% pain, 20% embarrassment, and 10% laughing at myself. And all of my friends are just laughing even harder, now that I've seemingly confirmed their suspicions. So there. Yep, I think most men my age have had the experience of desperately and guiltily trying to demonstrate that a fold of loose pants fabric is indeed just that. Never helps the situation. Oh well. 8th grade English, my friend John sat next to me and had a really cute girl sit next to him on the other side. We had one of those very thick textbooks, like 1,200 pages or something. One afternoon, while the teacher was talking and writing on the board, John leans over and taps me on the shoulder. "Hey, watch this." He had that particular smile that told me I was going to regret whatever happened next. He closes his textbook, slides the text onto his lap, checks the teacher one more time, and leans over to tap Steph on the shoulder. "Hey Steph, check this out. Push-ups." Steph looks over and utters an, "Oh my god." She then leans over for a closer look and goes, "How are you doing that? Is that with your legs?" At this point, John's face turns positively evil, and he utters those words we all wish we could say. "That's not my leg." Needless to say, Steph turned bright red, as did I. John cracked up out loud, drawing the teacher's attention, and the rest of the class was spent explaining what happened every time the teacher turned his back. Well, it was 6th grade and I had a hot teacher, Mrs. K. It was the middle of the year and it was a boring day. Me being 12, I saw that she had on pantyhose and a miniskirt, so I began to daydream. I was completely solid and then she began another assignment. Problem was that she asked someone to pass it out, and that someone was me. So I got up and walked around like a duck with my hands in my pockets and walked super slowly and passed them out with one hand. Every guy knew why. I was a junior in high school and was in my personal finance class, and I was wearing just sweatpants with no boxers because they got too sweaty during gym, so I was rocking it commando. We were giving presentations on something along the lines of how we were going to be financially independent, and we had all of our papers in a stack, and whatever paper she pulled out had to present. When the teacher called my name, I was still at full mast, so I just waistbanded it. About halfway through my presentation, my Johnson relaxes enough to fall out of my waistband and is just angled up down my pant leg in full view of 30 classmates. This one girl takes a picture of it and sent it in a group that I was in with the cool juniors, who weren't narcs, when we were planning parties. Apparently some people thought I had a huge member due to the way the fabric fell down my leg, so it looked like I had an extra 2 inches. So it all worked out in the end. Children of hoarders. When did your parents go beyond the point of no return? My grandmother was a hoarder, but only with food. She would buy in bulk and never throw anything away, even if it was past the expiration date. When we visited, we would very quietly throw some things away and not tell her. There was a jar of pickles in her fridge that was older than me. I'm 27. She did it because she grew up in extreme poverty and neglect. Her mother would just abandon her and her siblings for days, and they would be reduced to digging through trash to eat. When she grew up, she made sure that there would always be food available. This is a thing about children of the Great Depression. My grandmother was happy as a clam when she found out about big box stores like Costco. So much food, most of it inedible and way past due. I lived with my mum and my grandmother, who were both hoarders. The point of no return began when my grandmother got divorced and moved into a smaller house. That's when the "there's no room for anything" excuse became a thing. I think it's just because my grandmother loves shopping. It's her hobby. She will go to places like Kmart and Big Lots and look at their sale shelves for the best deals and get basically whatever is on the shelf. She forgets what she buys too. On multiple occasions, she'll buy me the same book twice, and for Christmas, she literally gets me whole garbage bags worth of small dumb stuff that was on sale. Women's socks in this case. She even apologizes because there were more presents, but she'd lost them. So decades of losing things results in massive piles of forgotten crap, and she's afraid to just have me or some company go through it because her precious items might be in there. I have a diamond necklace somewhere in there. She hasn't seen that necklace in 20 years. I noticed my dad was over the edge when every cardboard box that entered the house was not allowed to leave because I can't find a use for it. And we also at one point had 14 miniature schnauzers in a single-story suburban house because we don't have one in that color yet. God, the animal hoarding really gets to me. My mother-in-law had to have a chihuahua in every color. Never took the time to potty train any of them and never really paid much attention to them. But she had one in every color. Those poor dogs. Dated a girl whose parents were both established hoarders. In fact, they both already had separate homes and never lived together, because each home was already packed with their respective stuff. That's starting out beyond the point of no return. I should note that although we dated exclusively for 7 months, she'd never invite me back to her place, saying, "It's just a bunch of boxes." I have a feeling that she had the hoarding thing going on as well. In my experience, children of hoarders either hold on to everything or hold on to nothing. I can imagine that after growing up there, you'd either accept it as the normal way of life or completely reject your parents' ways, as many children are wont to do. Must feel very liberating going from smelly, claustrophobic madness to a clinical, empty flat. My mother was a hoarder. I don't know when it started. It was well established by the time I was born. She had been forced to give up 2 babies for adoption in her teens, with rumors unconfirmed that it was a close family member that was the father. After that, it always seemed that she spent the rest of her life trying to fill up the hole that those 2 babies left in her heart. She had 6 more children of her own, plus adopted a 7th, me. And then she just started collecting random homeless people and giving them a place to stay. Our house was a typical hoarder's house, filthy and wall-to-wall with junk piled and stacked. It was a horrible embarrassment, and I wonder sometimes how I'd be different if I'd been raised in a normal home. After we kids were grown, sometimes we would come in collectively and do a massive cleanup of the house, and I can still remember the look of sadness and grief on my mum's face when she would sit and watch passively as we carried off all of her piles of junk. and then she would hide as much junk as she could to keep us from getting rid of it all. That's when I realized she had a weird dysfunctional attachment to this stuff that normal people don't feel. Prior to that, I'd always just thought of her as lazy or maybe just horribly ignorant of how to organize things. As I understand it in my mother, it was loss. The terrible sense of loss and helplessness she felt in having her babies taken from her. She just couldn't cope with that, and in her mind, keeping things and other people was a way of avoiding loss. It was a comfort to her to have things and people, but never really enough to fulfill her, so she had to always have more. Like an addiction, I guess. I had another thought. As I mentioned, I am adopted. I have various dysfunctions but no tendency towards hoarding. Both of my sisters, though, who were her natural daughters, have that tendency as well. In times of high stress in their lives, I've seen them start to hoard things and fill up their homes. Fortunately, they have a better network of support and a less traumatic past than my mother had, so they haven't crossed over into the point of no return phase. I just find it interesting that there appears to be a genetic element to hoarding. Dated a girl with a hoarder mum. Their full-size basement, over 2,000 square feet, was always wall-to-wall with just stuff, with a little path to get to the washer and dryer. It didn't creep into the upstairs until the first son moved away. Girlfriend had 2 older brothers, and then the brother's room was filled with dollar store stuff and old clothes. The other brother graduated and moved out, and his room was filled with junk. Then the marriage started to fall apart, and that's the state I saw it in. Then the entry hall was floor-to-ceiling with boxes with about a 2-foot-wide path that took you to the living room or right to the bedrooms. The couch was clear with about a 3-foot path in front of it. Racks of clothes stacked with boxes. Lots and lots of unopened dollar store toys. All of her kids were older than 18 and no grandkids. The kitchen was stacked with piles of old newspapers. Only about 2 open spots to eat at the kitchen table. I broke up with her daughter just before she moved out, so I don't know how it ended. I'm guessing not well. This sounds like my in-laws. The kids' rooms were turned into storage one by one as they moved out. It went from stuff they didn't want to throw out to the contents of their parents' houses when they passed away because they couldn't get rid of or sell anything. Now they go to estate sales regularly looking for cheap things to give their kids. They absolutely have good finds once in a while, but for the most part, the stuff is in piles in unused rooms, bedrooms, closets, and wherever else they find. I got laid off, so I took some time to go and clean out my partner's old room. Day 1, I had about 5 full trash bags that I left to go and get some food. I returned to the house to see her going through the trash bags. That's when I realized how bad the problem really was. Not my parents, but my grandmother. After her husband died, she started buying all kinds of things she didn't need. My parents live 8 hours away from her, and her other daughter is sick and can't drive, so no one knew how bad stuff was getting. Now, we knew she had those tendencies, we knew that she bought a lot of stuff, and we knew she didn't clean very well. But we had no idea how bad it actually was. She had a stroke in January and she wanted to be in her own home. So my aunt, the one who can't take care of herself, moved in to try and help her get back on her feet. Predictably, this was a terrible idea. She lasted 6 weeks. During this time, I drove up to visit and was absolutely appalled. They were eating delivery every night because the kitchen was unusable. Just piles of crap that covered all the counters and stove. We later found out that the stove didn't even work, and blocking you from even entering the kitchen. All over the house there was just trash and crap. And oh god, the mice. So many mice. I think I saw a snake too. I told my aunt at that time that she needed to get grandmother help. Keep in mind that my aunt really couldn't even take care of herself, and she kept insisting they were fine. When I got back home, I called my mum and told her how bad it was. She was in the process of taking off from work when my aunt and grandmother had a terrible falling out. So my mum and dad went over there to take over. I drove up to help and we spent an entire weekend cleaning out 2 bedrooms. Yes, it took an entire weekend for 2 bedrooms. She had 35 Christmas stockings that still had the tags on them. She had probably had 10 years of newspapers in her living room, and when I was there, I offered to take some of them out. She got really upset and flustered and kept telling me no, she was going to go through them. Seriously, 10 years. That's when I started to realize it wasn't just mess, there was something really psychologically wrong. She got really agitated just by anyone being in her house, but to be honest, she's always been like that. When my sister and I were younger, the family would stay at their house when we visited, but she'd never give us the key. If we came back from visiting other relatives and Oma and Opa weren't at the house when we got there, we had to either go somewhere or wait in the car till they got home and let us in. So we really weren't too surprised that she didn't want anyone in her house. Once we realized the reason, I think it was because she knew how bad it was, though she actively denies it. Just being in the house for more than 10 minutes, our eyes started watering and our noses got really congested. It was clearly a really unhealthy environment. The amount of mouse scat we cleaned out of the cabinets was probably a biohazard. We should have worn the masks from the bathroom, but we'd already thrown them out. She ended up having to go home because she couldn't stay by herself, and no one can stay in that house. She had a live-in nurse for a very short time, and that person was like, "What the heck?" and quit. We still haven't finished the house, and to be honest, probably never will. Thanks for listening, it really is helpful to write out. Gosh, this was actually really cathartic. I don't know if any of our listeners are getting the Lady Macbeth-like compulsion to scrub their skin clean until it's raw. Doing these stories for so long is making the narrator feel dirty. During my 20s, Dad developed traits he hadn't exhibited before, including hoarding. He had an undiagnosed tumor in his right temporal lobe. That's an area of the brain responsible for high-level functions, motivation, prioritization, a few other things. He literally didn't know when he was finished reading the newspaper, so he kept years of newspapers stacked in his place. He was terrified of losing something important if anything got thrown away. What finally got him on track to proper treatment was a CT scan. Obviously, hoarding has many different causes. This cause is rare. But in case it helps anyone listening, other symptoms included deterioration in various organizing skills, and he gradually developed a short temper. The condition went undiagnosed until it impaired his spatial skills and his balance. This type of ailment usually gets diagnosed because of headaches or seizures, which aren't present in every instance. Dad got his diagnosis late in the game. He wouldn't have survived another month without treatment. In technical terms, it was a 5.5 cm grade 4 astrocytoma with a 10 mm midline shift. Surgery and radiation therapy brought him 2 years, and most of that was quality time, which was as good as medical science could do. Since then, a new medicine called Temodar has been approved to treat that condition, so outcomes are a little better now. It was still a very rough diagnosis. He was disabled for the rest of his life, but his thinking was somewhat clearer. In layman's terms, there was healthy but swollen tissue that returned to normal function. On the other hand, if you're able to get someone diagnosed while they still have a grade 1 or grade 2 astrocytoma, then the outcome can be much better. Only about 16,000 Americans each year develop primary brain tumors, so don't worry too much. Yet, if someone reading this notices sudden hoarding behavior in a relative, along with hand tremors and personality changes, it would be worth asking a doctor whether diagnostic tests are appropriate. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I think it was when my dad left, about 15 years into their marriage. I grew up in a messy house, but not hoarder-level messy. I know my dad cleaned up a lot too. After my parents got divorced, my mum went off the rails. Depressed and lashing out and no cleaning. It was a while ago, so I was pretty young, but I think this is also when she started buying excessive amounts of stuff and never throwing anything out. I know she doesn't feel like her job has much value, so I think she derives a lot of satisfaction from buying gifts for people. She used to go through our trash at night and wake us up screaming if we'd thrown anything out that could be useful again. As bad as it got after my dad left, my siblings and I still used to clean all the time, so it wasn't horrendous. We'd periodically clean out the fridge and clean rooms of the house. After we all moved out, it got really, really bad. Just piles of crap completely covering every surface. She still buys way too much crap and gets furious if we try to stop her. I receive boxes of stuff all the time as gifts and I just donate it immediately. I don't even want to thank her for it, for fear that she'll start buying more as gifts. As a result, I've worked pretty hard to be a tidy person and throw out stuff on the regular. I freaking hated growing up in that mess, and I would never date a girl who was messy at all. Just don't want to risk raising kids in the same environment where I grew up. As an addendum, I've noticed a lot of children of hoarder parents feel hurt or resentful that their parents chose their stuff over them. I don't feel this way at all. I know she's incapable of cleaning. I don't see her learning how to do that for me or my siblings for anything. I've watched her spend hours trying to clean even one area of the couch, sobbing with frustration and not even being able to do it. Honest question. As people who've had personal experiences with hoarding, what's your opinion of the TLC show Hoarders? Do you find it offensive, or do you think it makes others more empathetic because they can see that it's a mental illness? I too watch it if it's on, and I see it as I'm channel surfing. I see the show as somewhat exploitative, but it also gives me insight into my own parents' lives together, and it helps me understand my mum's compulsions a little better, and hopefully curb my own. I'm not good at throwing things away either, and have a tendency towards storing things that I don't have any use for. My mum hoarded after her parents died. She was unable to let go of any of their things, and it just got worse and worse. She was already a clutterbug, making numerous copies of every single piece of paper that she thought was important to family history. She was a genealogist, and buying multiple copies of newspapers, books, and things that had anything in them about our family members, her genealogical work, and the towns where our families originated. My dad, bless his heart, is still cleaning out from under all her stuff, more than 3 years after her death. It's hard on him. He describes the piles and boxes and file cabinets as time bombs, because without fail, as he's going through pounds upon pounds of useless papers, he'll find something important, touching or really valuable. Pieces of her jewelry, photos of her as a young woman, letters from people long passed away that should be saved. It's just incredible the minutiae she thought were important, and the important things she thought weren't worth much. They're exactly the opposite of what we see as valuable or not. Mine were beyond the point of no return when they got their 12th cat. Poor kitties. As damaging as hoarding can be to the people doing it, the fact that it can wildly affect their kids and pets is possibly the most tragic part. Most animals that you see in rescues who come from hoarding situations are wildly traumatized. My mother owned 3 small businesses. During the financial crisis of 2008, the bank recalled the business loan. She refused to deal with the loss and has now idealized that time in her life as the best thing that ever happened to her, even though it was awful for pretty much everyone because how she mishandled her finances so badly and put the family in debt to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Anyway, imagine having the inventory of 3 Walgreens. Her businesses had nothing to do with pharmacies, but they have a similar level of inventory. All the hallways, the bedrooms, the living room, family room, dining, kitchen, and the others are totally unusable. Boxes and loose mountains of product are stacked higher than your head. You can only sleep on half of your bed because the other half is covered in stuff, and to access the bed you have to climb up and over stacks of boxes. You live in constant fear that the family pets are going to dislodge something and be buried alive. You live in fear that you are going to be buried alive. That's what life was like for 7.5 years. No amount of therapy or medication or throwing things away. We once brought a dumpster to the house and got rid of an entire bedroom full of junk, but she replaced it within a week. Or any serious talks about any change of her behavior. For unrelated reasons, my parents got divorced this year. A stipulation of the divorce was that she and her stuff had to vacate the home. Instead of hiring moving trucks, she was doing 2 or 3 trips daily with her minivan. My dad had to get a court order forcing her to move the stuff, and the judge made my dad vacate the premises because my mum insisted that he was the problem. It took a fleet of U-Hauls and 24 hours going hard to remove all her stuff. She's happy with all of her stuff. She chose it over her family over and over again. It was always more important than us, more important than our safety and health. I wish that she loved me more than she loves a box of expired product that hasn't been opened since 2008, but she doesn't, and I've spent a lot of time in therapy dealing with that. I'm so sorry. That really is one of the most emotionally hard things about living with a hoarder. It's miserable dealing with the physical aspects, the filth, danger, and waste, but the emotional aspect of coming in a distant second to useless crud is so much worse. My mum is a chronic hoarder and refuses to throw anything away and is constantly buying new stuff. Food, clothes, dishes, blankets and paintings, magazines, you name it. I bet I can dig through a pile at home and find it. She buys food from a discount market and everything else from thrift stores because she can't pass up such a good deal. She grew up on a farm where they didn't have it that bad. Her dad made a lot of money, but he was a hoarder too. When he died, we cleared out 3 sheds of pure junk from the farm. I may have had my point of no return yesterday, December 26th. I was at my parents' house cooking with my mum, and she said, "Can you get me the milk from the fridge?" I opened the fridge and the first thing I saw front and center was a big block of moldy cheese. I asked where the milk is and my mum said, "Oh, it's in the back." I lost it. If the first thing I see is moldy cheese, then by my logic, the milk at the back is going to be crap. I started grabbing open containers and throwing them at the trash. Tomato paste with a thick cap of mold, a Tupperware with green crab meat, a plastic container with dark green guacamole. Anything I thought looked like it was spoiled. My mum freaked out and ran over to the garbage saying, "This is still good! This is still good!" While picking things out of the trash, I just looked at her, dropped the container I had in my hand on the floor, and walked over to the couch where I remained for the next 6 hours, waiting for my ride to get there. I just couldn't stand it anymore. My father-in-law is a hoarder. I have to purge things at home to keep my wife from falling into this. For him, he sees value in everything. He won't part with anything. It's like cutting out his soul to clean out the trash. He has 30-year-old catalogs from companies that don't exist. We've had to clean out his kitchen, bathrooms, and living areas annually. The big problem is he's a farmer with tons of space, barns, sheds, and a very large house. We're dreading the day he passes away. Not for the loss, but the mess we'll have to address before we liquidate his house. You probably already do this, but be careful with your purges and your wife. A common, well-known trigger for hoarding is someone or something else taking one's possessions away. We've had the talk several times, and I'm gentle. I found out that if we do it as a weekly task, it has become routine and she deals with it easier. Never just out of the blue instantly, time to purge. I make sure that she takes responsibility with what she purges as far as personal stuff goes. Newspapers are an automatic throw-out. I would like to cancel the paper, but she wants to hang on to it. I have the opposite problem. My mum is a minimalist. She's also emotionally remote, and growing up, all love was conditional. I think she wanted the appearance of a perfect household and a perfect life. Any grade less than 90% was punished, and bathrooms were cleaned out twice a week. So she'd go through the house and throw out anything that was out of place. Our house was sterile and cold. The only memories I have left of my childhood are a single photo album that she puts in the basement, and anything that I've managed to squirrel away. She has thrown everything away from my dad's childhood and has 3 pictures from hers. I go into a panic when I can't find anything because growing up it meant that she had snatched it. I find myself accumulating stuff, now being an adult, because I'm comforted by things being around me. I can't be attacked when my back is against a hard surface. She gave me a copy of that awful life-saving magic of cleaning up for Christmas. Thanks, Mum. Something I can respond to. My mum was always very messy before I was born, but it wasn't anything crazy. My father cheated on her because she could be very manipulative and, well, she's just crazy. Anyway, he left her with 4 kids, paid child support, but not much else. I think she just felt like she lost everything. Lost her home, lost her life, just lost it. She gets knocked up, with me, from some rebound guy she was dating, and that ended quickly. So it's me, my brother, and 3 sisters. Fast forward a few years and we have 117 cats in a 3-bedroom house. My mum sleeps in one room with me and my sisters cram into another bedroom. My brother sleeps on the floor because obviously the 3rd bedroom became the spare room, which was crammed floor to ceiling with old clothes and toys. Then it just started spiraling from there. Fast forward another few years and there were garbage bags of old tattered clothing everywhere in the house, garbage bags of actual garbage, stacks of newspapers, and oh gosh, those fricking TV guides. Ugh, frick those TV guides. And of course, lots of cats and cat poo, cat pee, and dead cats. Also, we could always tell how long we'd lived somewhere by how many dead Christmas trees there were in the house. We had to cover up the windows with cardboard to make sure the neighbors couldn't see in. Friends weren't allowed over, and in case you're wondering, yes, being raised under constant fear of others finding out you're a secret monster does in fact lead to some incredibly debilitating intimacy issues. But it did give me some heart-wrenching crap to write about in my college application essays. Hello, Stanford. What's the strangest reason you've ever heard someone expelled from school for? My friend was suspended because he was being pantsed continuously one day. After the 4th or 5th time, everyone realized he was just pulling down his own shorts quickly in the hall between classes. When I was in junior high, we had a large hurricane, Hurricane Gloria, which hit our town. And due to electricity being out, trees on the road, flooding, among other things, we were off school for 2 weeks. My vacation was 2 weeks plus a day, since I was sent home, not expelled, for wearing a homemade shirt that said, "I was blown by Gloria" on my first day back. You're a frickin' champ. My daughter had a shirt from a store called Masters Bait and Tackle. Only one teacher got it, it was the last semester and she had all of her credits, so she really wanted to get suspended. A couple got caught having done the deed in the stairwell, on the stairs in front of the camera. On one of the only cameras in the school that actually worked. I don't know how it worked in your school, but there was a designated stairwell for this at mine. There was little foot traffic, no cameras, and plenty of used protection on the floors. It was a really gross stairwell. We had 2 kids a few years ago who were caught doing the deed on school grounds. Nothing really that abnormal except that they did it on the school oval in the early hours of the morning and were supposedly caught by the school priest. The priest in question lives on the school grounds and likes to go on walks in the early morning. Can you imagine the conversation that ensued? "Excuse me, do you have a moment to speak about our Lord and Savior? Jesus Christ, what are you kids doing?" A kid in my school got suspended for not only whacking the mule in the hot geometry teacher's class, but for not stopping when she caught him. 2 guys in my school got expelled for stealing a Rice Krispie treat from the cafeteria. Oh, this made me chuckle, but I remember how strict my school was on stealing from the cafeteria. Supposedly, if you were to have stolen this Rice Krispie there, you'd not only be expelled but criminally charged. I just like that the gravity of the situation was such that not 1 but 2 people were forced to leave the school over the loss of a $1 stock price candy bar. And the worst kind that barely qualifies as candy, too. In 5th grade, there was a classmate of mine and she was not someone who bowed to peer pressure. She started intentionally wearing obvious mismatched socks as a sign of her individuality. She was very quiet and didn't have many friends. Our teacher noticed the mismatched socks and after a week told the girl to wear matching ones. Keep in mind I'm 69 years old and this was a very rural public school back in the day. Well, the next week, the girl again was wearing mismatched socks and the teacher sent her to the principal's office. The principal told the girl to write 500 times, "I will not wear mismatched socks," and sent a note home to the parents. The next day, the girl again wore mismatched socks and the pages she was told to write said, "I will wear mismatched socks." The principal wasn't amused and suspended her for a week. Now, I didn't know the girl very well, but I sure liked her spirit. I organized a protest for the students to support her. The next morning, there were 92 of us standing in the schoolyard, and despite all threats, we refused to enter the school until the independent girl was allowed in and able to wear mismatched socks. Parents of students were called to come to the school and pick us up because we were all suspended as well. When parents found out what all the ruckus was about, they were very angry with the teacher and the principal. Our school didn't even have a dress code. At the end of the day, the principal caved and gave in to our demands. By junior high school, her family moved and I lost track of her. But that day we stood up for her, changed her, and she became more outgoing and made new friends. This kid in 8th grade, I was a freshman in high school but we all knew him from middle school, was on one of those free webcam sites chatting with girls and was tickling his pickle in class. The teacher was new, probably in her second year, and was probably 25 years old, and when she saw his computer screen, apparently she broke down in tears. That kid got expelled real quick. A girl that was in 9th when I was in grade 10 was expelled for giving the Australian kiss, down under, to 3 guys at the same time in a dark auditorium during first block, and on more than one occasion. Some guys started whacking it to the pictures in the biology book. In 8th grade, an older cousin taught me how to play craps. Like an idiot, I started running a casino-like thing at lunch. Anyway, I got caught with a massive bag of money and was suspended. My school had a policy that if you were suspended and got into trouble again, you'd be expelled. About a month later, I jumped in a puddle and was sent to the principal. They wanted to expel me, but my parents argued it would ruin my future as I had a perfect academic record. Ended up narrowly escaping expulsion for jumping in a puddle. But did you get to keep the massive bag of money? It was probably like $30, but at the time that was a lot of money to make all by myself. How on earth did they justify trying to expel you for jumping in a puddle? Well, we have 2 anecdotes from OP to judge his character on. First of all, we know he was continually being flippant and flagrantly ignoring or butting heads with any authority figure. More likely though, it was a zero-tolerance policy, which are fricking dumb. Because you can get into situations like this where a not very disturbing or problematic thing suddenly becomes grounds for drastic action. Zero-tolerance policies are also how you get things like kids being suspended for trying to stop a fight between 2 other people, or even just being on the receiving end of physical violence, because that's still being involved in a fight even if they don't throw any punches themselves. My brother's friend prank-called their teacher while my brother was at his house. The kid ended up getting found out. My brother went in and told him he was there. They'd never have known either without him admitting it. As a reward for his honesty, he was suspended for 6 days and had to clean the school. Now kids, what do you do when you're in really deep crap? Come clean? No. You lie till they take you to the station. That is, unfortunately, the lesson of zero tolerance. Never fess up, never admit, never give them anything. Just deny it. Deny. Deny even when it's obvious. Deny when it seems pointless. Because zero tolerance means they'll try to screw you over no matter what. There's no point in helping them do it. Is it the school's way of preparing to help you deal with the police? Absolutely. Always assume that any claims they'll go easy on you if you confess are just bullcrap, which they almost certainly are. Cops are not empowered to change the charges being leveled against you. Honestly, telling my kids about the birds and the bees and mortality will be easy. Warning them that the world is full of officious sadists eager for a chance to screw them, that'll be hard. I didn't get expelled, but I did have some very embarrassing accusations thrown at me by a teacher, which got me in a lot of trouble at home and school. One day I came home from school, 8th grade I think, and my bedroom had been turned inside out and all of my video games had been opened up with the discs all over my desk. I asked my mum what the heck happened and she started yelling at me about how games like Grand Theft Auto were messing me up. I didn't own a copy of GTA, I mostly played JRPGs at the time. Apparently, one of my teachers called up and said I was drawing pictures of people doing the unspeakable act during class. Where this came from, I have no idea. I even showed my parents and teacher all of my notebooks to prove that I'd done no such thing. Yeah, I doodled a lot in class, but nothing that could be interpreted as raunchy in any way. I went back through my notes and discovered I was drawing Frog from Chrono Trigger the day this accusation was made. The teacher implied that video games were turning me into an unspeakable act offender, hence the thorough search of my bedroom by my parents. I guess I'm just really bad at drawing. In elementary school, I got a referral for drawing a Bob Arm from Mario Kart, because apparently I was drawing it to threaten the other students. I was 8! That is literally the least threatening weapon in the whole gaming universe. It's a little wind-up bomb with big white eyes. When I was in high school, I think my sophomore year, there was a senior who was expelled and not allowed to attend graduation because of a tiny pocket knife keychain in his car. It was one of those little freebie ones. At the time, I believe they came with a particular multi-pack of film, about 1.5 inches long with a keyring and containing only a single blade and a nail file. I think. It was barely usable as a letter opener. The guy had one, its ring connected to a bunch of other random keychains in a pile on the dashboard of his car. The dean happened to be walking through the parking lot and saw it, figured out whose car it was, and he was expelled for having a knife at school. Same year, earlier on, someone was expelled for a short piece of scrap copper pipe found in his locker, a leftover from some kludge repair he'd done to his car. It was considered to be paraphernalia from substance use. Zero tolerance is horribly stupid. That last sentence is turning into a bit of a rallying cry in the various stories in this video. It does seem to produce a lot of unjustly punished kids. I got suspended for 3 days for this. When I was 14 or 15, we had an art project where we had to pick basically any recognizable person, celebrity, sports player, etc., to paint in a certain style. One of my good friends decided to pick Eminem. So when we were in the computer room that lunchtime, he was Google image searching for a good picture. He stumbled across a picture of 2 people doing the deed, except Eminem's face had been photoshopped onto the guy's body and Britney Spears onto the female's. This was hilarious to us teenage boys, so as a joke, my friend pressed Ctrl-P, pretending he was going to print it, and changed the copies to 500. I leaned over and pressed Enter. We'd scarpered out of there when we realized they'd started printing and we couldn't stop it. At the end of lunch, a teacher roared my name from the other end of the corridor, and I obviously immediately knew why. Got taken to the waiting room by the headmaster's office, and my friend, who had been using that computer, was already sitting there. Went into the headmaster's office, and we were both trying to stifle laughs as we saw the huge pile of paper on his desk. My friend explained fully why he was looking for pictures and that he'd genuinely stumbled upon it by accident. The headmaster wouldn't believe him, as my friend had used someone else's account to use the internet, due to his not working, IT continually doing nothing to fix it, and someone figuring out that with some people's usernames, you could put the password as password and it would still let you in. This meant our headmaster thought he'd done it deliberately and was trying to get the other kid in trouble. Best part was our posh English headmaster saying, "Who is M and M?" And I leaned forward and pointed to the guy plowing Britney from behind and said, "He is." My friend burst out laughing and we were both given 3-day suspensions. My parents weren't impressed, but it was worth it. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. A guy at my school got expelled and arrested for photocopying dollar bills onto a regular piece of paper and trying to use them in the cafeteria. They also found a garbage bag full of them in a dumpster by his house. Last year, there was a whole operation dedicated to stealing money from the cafeteria. They'd print fake 10s and buy a $1 item with the fake, receiving $9 real back. Of course, they varied the bills they used, but eventually got caught. They made something like $900 in 1 week. Not expelled, but suspended. A stupid boy mucking around in art class, the teacher had enough of it and sent him to sit in the art cabinet on his own for 10 minutes. In most Australian schools, the art cabinet is a small walk-in cupboard with a sliding door. After 2 minutes, the teacher feels mean for sending him there and goes in to check on him. He's got his pants down around his ankles and is whacking the mule. He continues to do it as the teacher is screaming and the whole class can see him through the now open sliding door. He's now well known around the area as the Phantom Puller. This boy is not mentally handicapped in any way, just a full-on idiot. His dad had been friends with my dad for a long time, and naturally he's one of those boys who's developed a long-term crush on me. We're now 22 and he still manages to find me whenever I return to my hometown, with his annoying friends egging him on. When I was 17, I had to write a paper about what I would do if it was my last 24 hours on Earth. Being an idiot, I wrote stuff like blow stuff up and rob liquor stores. Well, my teacher thought I was serious and turned the paper into the principal, who turned it into the police. I got charged with a felony for threats of terror acts and expelled for 6 months. Not really embarrassing, I guess, but funny nevertheless. How did they expect you to write this paper? That seems like the kind of answer they were looking for.
I'm going to be a law-abiding citizen sitting at home and staring at the wall.
Not expelled, but suspended for 2 weeks. The person was accused of bringing fireworks and bangers into school. It was party poppers for celebrating their friend's birthday. People seem confused by banger. It's what we call them in Ireland. I guess the American equivalent would be firecrackers. You light them and they make a loud bang, hence the name. 2 8th graders from some school in a pretty upper-class area were caught doing the deed in the elevator. On camera. In the elevator. At school. Okay then. Well, I guess the purpose of elevators is for people to get down quick. I went to a Protestant school in Australia. My very good friend had just died from bone cancer. My girlfriend was comforting me and hugging me as I was crying my eyes out. A teacher came past and told her to move away as there was a no-touching rule. My girlfriend nicely and calmly explained the situation to the teacher, who responded by explaining that she was not concerned by this. I subsequently told her to get effed. I was marched up to the principal's office in front of all my mates, a crying, blubbering mess, where I was told I'd be taking a week off school due to suspension. The reason I was at school was because he had been in hospital for over a month and I was only made aware of his passing in the bus trip in. This all occurred before the school rang for the first period. I used to work as an office monitor in the 8th grade, and while picking up referral forms, what was used to write people up, there were 2 that caught my eye. The first, a kid who had popped some ED medication and started whacking it in class. When the teacher saw him and asked him to stop, he refused and kept going. The second was 2 kids who got caught in the bathroom. A guy was getting some action from a girl in a stall. What's weird is that the kids in the second one got expelled, but a guy I know who got a down-under kiss in the bus a year earlier and the girl who performed it just got suspended, not expelled. 2 kids, a guy and a girl, were expelled from my private school for her going south of the border on him in one of the staircases. The whole thing was recorded on video and shown to the students' parents. The parents had to sit and watch their kids receive and give the deed in question with the superintendent and dean of the school. "What the frick are you teaching kids these days, Dean?" Mr. Smith asked. "Jane's technique was deplorable." "We're sorry, Mr. Smith, Jane has always been a slow learner." You know, I shouldn't be surprised at the amount of this stuff happening in high schools, but I am. Crazy hormonal teens. My buddy duct-taped a kid to a desk at his old private school, was very quickly asked to leave. He got suspended for a week because he made a poll of the worst person to have ever existed. You could answer the leader of the Third Reich, the leader of the Taliban at the time, or the principal. A line outside of the men's bathroom for free mouth-to-groin fun times. There must have been 15 to 20 people in line once they found out what was going down. She was new to the school and I guess she wanted to service the boys. She was expelled right away. Her nickname? Roboho. Whacking it behind his math textbook. When the anthem came over the PA, only part of him was standing at attention. This one guy took a wire to a socket and short-circuited it. The entire building lost power. I almost got suspended for using Brokeback Mountain in a list of love stories in middle school. The teacher called my parents and asked if they were letting me be exposed to that sort of stuff. My parents just laughed. I'm in high school currently, and last year a friend was expelled for writing a threat to a teacher and also made a hit list. Nobody would have known it was him except he dropped it in the hall and a teacher picked it up and read it. I'm kinda glad he got caught. Also, a couple got caught doing the deed in the bathroom when a teacher walked in. Why did a teacher walk in? They were using a teachers-only bathroom. After getting suspended, the guy threatened to go to the school and go postal. Yeah, he's gone too. I was falsely accused of arson and expelled for it. Junior year, I picked up a dirty cigarette habit. Kids smoked everywhere on school grounds. End of the science hall outside, hopping out the giant windows in video class and smoking in a corner and in the locker rooms. Administrators tried like heck to catch the kids, but they rarely ever did. Our halls, science wing, art wing, etc., connected outside via paths around the school perimeter. So it was a circular race when an adult was coming. At any rate, our lunches were broken up into A, B, and C lunch, with our 4th hour scheduled accordingly. I was B. After the first half of algebra, I had to go to lunch with a friend named Jenny. Yes, her real name. We snuck off to go and have a smoke in the upstairs locker room in the gym. We go back into the unused dark showers, which are maze-like, to the turnhole air vent we blow our smoke out of. After we're done, we take our still-lit cigarette butts and rinse them under the faucet, wrap them in paper towels, and toss them in the trash. After I'd finished my process, Jenny started, but someone was quickly coming up the stairs. She rinsed it and tossed it in the trash. We booked it down the back staircase, outside, around the video hall to the science doors and slipped in. Perfumed up and washed hands, went back to class. 10 minutes later, the entire school was evacuated, the fire department arrives, and we watched them hurry up the back stairs to the locker room. Uh-oh. As you can guess, her cigarette didn't hit the water in our hurry to retreat. It caught the trash can on fire, the paper towel dispenser, the wood trim, and then spread to the wooden stalls in the toilets. We were named by the parking attendant, saying she saw us cut across the parking lot where the locker door had been and run toward the video hall. She didn't see us come out. All evidence they had was circumstantial. As everyone was filing inside, a police officer quickly grabbed my arms from behind and cuffed me, in front of all my friends and many others. I was walked to the principal's office. He then accused me of smoking. I emptied my pockets. I had no smokes, lighter, matches. I asked what it was about. He insisted I already knew. Obviously I did, but I'm not buckling. I knew what sort of trouble I'd be in for having the fire department come, no matter how big or small a fire. So, deny, deny, deny. When he said the sentence, "You're being expelled for arson," he sat back and stared at me, eyes glazed and completely deadpan, gauging my reaction. I was speechless. What? Me? I may have been a smoker, I skipped classes several times, but I'd never been in serious trouble before. I had good grades. It took me about 2 minutes to process everything, kind of asking trailing off questions and gaping at him like a fish on land. There was a hearing for both of us in front of the school board. Even though they found cigarettes and a Zippo on Jenny, that witch threw me under the bus when she went after me and confessed. But she took it a step further. Not only did I deny we were both in there, but she put me there and said I lit the paper towel dispenser on fire. It made a big fuss locally, and no school would take me to finish the year and 3 months of high school that I had left. I applied at an alternative high school to have the assistant principal tell me they don't educate pyromaniacs. 6 schools total denied me, even adult high schools. I was finally accepted 8 months later and graduated with high honors. I lost many friends during it all. A few years ago, several classmates invited me to the graduating class page of my school. Even though I finished my last year somewhere else, I had known all of these people since kindergarten. The admin of the page then removed me and sent a rider email about how I wasn't alumni and never would be. Jenny tried to friend me on Facebook after she got out of jail for something unrelated. The request has been sitting there for over a year. Screw you, Jenny. In cooking class, a girl was flipping a knife around for God knows why and lost her grip. Ended up stabbing herself smack dab in the nether regions. She got suspended for violation of some safety rule or something, but gosh darn, it must have sucked for her. I had a friend in high school who got expelled, later reinstated, because a girl said that he threatened her and then later changed her story to feeling threatened by him. This girl would sit behind him in class and accuse his father of cheating on his mum and being a terrible person for basically no reason. She had this little loser minion who followed her around and basically did whatever she did. Pretty sure the guy was in love with her. So anyway, after like 2 years of this crap, he tells her to shut the F up. Then he got expelled. It was one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. This kid was suspended at my school for throwing biscuits at the goths. It was funny because he thought he was being cool by teasing them, but the goths were catching and eating the biscuits. Hilarious. A guy in my class got expelled because a branch fell out of a tree in front of his feet and they thought he broke it. My niece just got expelled from school for convincing another child to take off his shorts. But she's 3 years old, so I don't understand why it's such a big deal. When did you realize that he or she was not the one? I usually don't mind age gaps like 5 to 10 years. We'd been dating for about 2 months, and I all of a sudden realized just how different we were. We did enjoy our company together, but every time we were out with her friends, I felt like I was back in my early 20s, and every time we went out with my friends, she found it dull and boring. It just didn't work out, and we both kind of agreed that this wouldn't work in the long run. So we left as friends. I think that was more of a personality thing, not the age difference. I'm 14 years younger than my husband. He's 41, I'm 27. We got married when we were 36 and 22. We both have similar personalities and don't care for the going out scene. His mother is in her early 60s and she does like it. Everything I thought I knew about him was a lie. For example, he was fired from McDonald's for peeing in the parking lot in front of customers. He told me he quit.
Of course I quit. I eventually stopped peeing. I couldn't pee forever. My bladder is only so big. Honey, where are you going? Honey!
When I became more in love with my memories of her than the person standing in front of me. Holy crap. Thanks. I just got out of a pretty bad relationship. She completely changed from the time that I met her until now. The only thing that kept me going was the image of the girl that I fell in love with. When she tried to shoot me with a crossbow, she was a diagnosed sociopath schizophrenic. We were play fighting and she escalated it by grabbing her bow staff. I grabbed an empty blow dart gun, she knew it was empty, and there was a standoff. She went to the bathroom where I kept my crossbow and started loading it. I was telling her it was no longer funny and this was going too far. She kept loading it, started to aim, and pulled the trigger. The bolt flew past my left side and stuck in the wall. A major fight ensued. My friend was in the other room. All she heard was, thunk. Did you seriously try to fricking shoot me?
So my question about your story is, why do you have so many weapons lying around?
When he didn't want to come and see me, and I had to spend 5 hours in a train every weekend to come and see him.
He had the economic possibility to do it, but couldn't be bothered.
This worries me. I'm long distance right now, and I'm the one that travels every single time. She came once over Valentine's Day weekend, so of course everything was packed and not normal in the city. She's recently said that she's not coming back up here again, and her dad thinks she's serious about it. I'm getting my master's degree and will probably be here for at least 2 more years. It just seems like she doesn't want to come and see me as much as she doesn't want to be inconvenienced. Long distance is hard. Honestly, if they aren't willing to discuss putting some reciprocal effort in, it might be time to call it quits. When he spent 3 hours screaming at me for overdrafting our joint checking account, I'd written and recorded 2 checks to pay bills. He'd spent over $100 that week at bars and was mad at me that there wasn't enough money to order himself a pizza. After he called me a stupid B-word in front of our daughter, I threw him out. When I realized I was optional. When we went on a trip that was supposed to be our best trip ever, as it's been 14 months that we were apart, and I just didn't feel like I loved him that much anymore. And all the jokes he said seemed so old and we just didn't click. He was once the love of my life, but time passes and I met more people and got older and realized that he wasn't the one I wanted. It sucks, but I can't help it. When I realized that when something fun happened, when I went somewhere or witnessed something cool, had new experiences, learned something and was enjoying life, he was never there. We had totally different interests. He was a nice guy and we had a peaceful life together, but the things I wanted to do weren't things he wanted to do. Now I have someone who loves the same kind of life I do. Still good friends with the ex though. It's hard, this can go the other way too. Had a few friends that were together and they did everything together. Eventually, she just got sick of never having any space, because if he wasn't there or she wasn't there, the person left behind felt left out. The breakup was pretty ugly there, though they seem fine now if they happen to end up in the same place. It's an odd balancing act, having space and time to be an individual, but not so much that you can never interact. I realized when he proposed. Context, he had just broken up with me. I realized it was a game and I called his bluff. When she was making dinner, she asked me to do the dishes from last night. We had plenty of plates left, so I said I'd do it after dinner, so I wouldn't have to do it twice. She ordered me to do it now, and I said no, and she told me that either I'd do it now or get the heck out of her face, or she'd throw the boiling water with beans over me. That's when stuff kind of clicked and I realized I'd been living with a crazy lady for a while. We broke up a few months afterwards, but I hadn't finished letting her blackmail and intimidate me into giving up all my money and dignity yet. Context behind this question, I'm in that part of life where even after breaking my heart, I have difficulty getting over her and I still think we're meant for each other, despite me trying my hardest to be rational about the situation. I'm going to tell you all what someone told me after my first long relationship ended. I said they were full of crap then and didn't listen. I've later apologized to them. He or she is not worth it. If you aren't together, there's a reason. But there's no such thing as the one. There's just finding the one you can live with happily. I spent months pouting and crying and basically being a big witch to everyone, and in retrospect I want to grab my former self and punch him in the head. She wasn't meant for you, you weren't meant for each other, and by having your head up your butt about it, you're probably missing out on other opportunities in life. I sure as heck did. There were 3 major phases. First, we'd been dating for close to 6 months. He had never seen me wear the same outfit twice, that's how little we saw each other. Second, he kept pressuring me to do the deed with him despite me recently being the victim of unwanted advances. He was not considerate of my hesitation or concerns. And third, I didn't want him to be the father of my future children. I didn't want that future with him. So I broke up with him. When she told me how proud she was of me and I realized the truth that I'd long avoided, I had no respect for her or her opinions. She was a nice person and hot, and I wanted to be in love with her, but I was lying to her and to myself to help get over a bad breakup. I ended it, and it was terrible. It was the right thing to do, but it was terrible. When she told me she hated girls and has no girlfriends. When I realized that he was still his mother's baby boy and checked with his mother on everything. When she sat there telling me she couldn't put 100% into the relationship and that her feelings had changed. Once you hit that point, you realize the relationship will never be what it once was. I think it's better to be honest about those things. It sucks and all, but in the long run it's really for the best, even if it hurts on the moment. When she told me, I think we should see other people. Not sure if I'm reading too much into that though. I'd been miserable for over 2 years, but I guess I was complacent. Anyway, I think the final straw was when we went to Disney World during spring break week, and it was ridiculously crowded. She wanted to catch the train to the other side of the park, but the line was very long and I had to use the restroom, so I said, "Why don't you get in line, I'll run to the restroom really quick and meet you here." Fine, no problem. I got to the restroom and there's a line, so I waited, about 10 minutes, did my business and then headed back to the train line. She proceeded to make a huge scene, cursing and yelling, because I left her in the line alone and if the train had frickin' come, blah blah blah. It clicked right then and there that we were constantly fighting over ridiculous stuff and that I'd become so used to it that I just continually let it happen. I finished out the rest of the trip, fairly numb, but avoided doing anything about it for another 2 weeks or so. We had another fight over what to eat that night and I just snapped and ended it then and there. I'm not a very emotional person, but that relationship messed me up pretty good. It's been almost 2.5 years now and I haven't even attempted to go on a date since then. Only recently am I starting to warm up to that idea. My ex just smoked all day, did all sorts of substances. I'm not against it as long as it's in moderation. She didn't have goals for the future and that put me off. Yeah, that kind of complacence is hard to get past. It's one thing if someone is content to stay at home and further their knowledge through reading and different hobbies or focus on their family, but nothing gives us nothing in most cases. After 12 years of marriage and having 2 kids, he started smoking spice and smack without telling me. He choked me to the point where I started blacking out and I took out my pocket knife and stabbed him in the back to let me go. My survival instincts kicked in. When he got out of jail, he came by against the restraining order. And I swore to him I'd kill him if he touched me again. Then our 10-year-old approached me and told me I needed to divorce Daddy because if I'm dead on the floor, who's going to protect him and his 2-year-old brother? It broke my heart, but I knew it was time. He's getting served with divorce papers today. Frick. Good for you. You should be proud of yourself for getting out of that. You're setting a great model for your kids, despite all the crap I'm sure they've seen. When I realized I was suppressing my sense of humor to make myself more attractive to him. When she cheated on me with her 45-year-old fat balding coworker with an ex-wife, a 14-year-old son, and a 6-year relationship with another woman because he's so present when we talk, it's just easy. Good luck with that crap. I was a few weeks away from proposing too. People lose their minds when they have midlife crises. Interestingly, several of her other coworkers reached out to me to say he's known to constantly hit on women at work inappropriately, and he's done this crap before. Part of me almost worries for her. Similar situation for me. Found out 5 months after the fact. 4 months after being talked into signing a lease on a house and 2 months after getting engaged that the ex flew to San Francisco for a business trip. Her response was to get mad at me and tell me that we were in a different place then and we weren't together. B-word, I dropped your daughter off at daycare the morning you flew out and 1 week later you talked to me about the house. Needless to say, engagement was off a week after I found out, moved out, and now have to pay 2 more months remaining on a lease to a place I no longer live in. Oh well, silver linings. Started dating a beautiful engineer with no kids and no effed up childhood and passed to end up screwing up the relationship. Don't worry for her, man, it only leads to doubt. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When he stopped caring about himself and gave up. When she said the following, I can't wait till I'm old enough to have kids, I've always wanted kids, which rings true for me too, but I don't want you to be the father of my children. I still want to be with you, but I don't think you're father material. We had been together for over a year. We went through the drive-thru at Crystal and she got mad because I asked for my burgers with no onions or pickles. She said I was inconveniencing her. I told her that I didn't love her anymore and broke up with her that day. He was a super nice guy, probably one of the nicest guys I've ever met and ever will meet. I had a really hard time coming to terms with the fact that this perfectly nice, loving, caring man was not going to be the one for me. There wasn't anything wrong, but nothing was really right either. We had a ton in common. I guess we were just missing the chemistry that you need to make it lasting. The relationship lasted almost a year. It took me a few months to really determine it wasn't right. I suppose the moment I really realized was when I thought, he deserves to be loved the way he loves me, but by someone else. And it didn't bother me to think that. It's been about 2 years since we broke up. He's in a very loving relationship now, and I couldn't be happier for him. We'd been living together for around 6 or 7 months, and I'd been letting her stay rent-free after she graduated. I'd come home and she would be stressed out from not having a job, getting rejected, not getting interviews, and I would try and comfort her despite at that time working the most stressful job I've ever had to date. To the point I was diagnosed with high blood pressure, anxiety, and sleeping disorders. I was able to deal with her ignoring me and being unhappy all the time because I always told myself once she got a job, it would get better or get back to normal. Then one day I came home and she complained that I'd left my underwear out on the floor when I left for work that morning, and something just snapped. I'd always known her mother was a perma-grump who could never be happy no matter what, and I couldn't stand being around her for more than a day or two, but suddenly I looked at my girlfriend and I clearly saw her gradually becoming her mother, and me being powerless to stop it. I saw that no matter what happened, no matter what I did, she was always going to find a way to be unhappy, and I just couldn't bear the idea of spending the rest of my life with someone like that. I also resented the fact that she was simultaneously dead set against becoming a traditional homemaker or mother, but at the same time doing a career that paid less than minimum wage. In essence, she just couldn't have been more useless to me if she tried. I wish we had had more time to talk about these things. I wish I could have articulated all of this when we were still together instead of years later, after a great deal of soul-searching. But alas, I needed hindsight before I realized a lot of what I was feeling and thinking. Thanks for letting me get this out. This feels so good to talk about. Thinking more about it, I never feel like she was wrong for not wanting to be a traditional homemaker. I just feel like she would have had to go one way or the other, and I felt like she was going to blame me for forcing her to, and ultimately resent me for it. The worst part was, that was exactly what happened in her parents' relationship, and that was why they divorced. When she complained about me leaving my underwear on the floor, I felt like I could have given her a mansion to live in and enough money to last the rest of our lives, and she would have still found a way to bring us both down over nothing. It broke my heart. I want to clarify something. That when I say she didn't want to do childcare or homemaking, she was super specific about that point. It wasn't just an offhand comment. In fact, every time we started talking about marriage, she would launch into a long spiel about the things she definitely wasn't going to do. I kinda go back and forth with this. What if she was? Don't do that to yourself, man. She's only going to hold you back when the one comes into your life for real. And if you're going to end up with her, it'll happen eventually all on its own. But don't let that possibility cloud your vision. For all intents and purposes, she was not your one. Honestly, when I discovered that he hated animals. I don't hate animals or even dislike them, but I would prefer to not have animals in the house that I live in. I just don't feel like having hair everywhere. Especially when I'm eating and a dog or cat comes by, I feel like there's a hair in my food or something. I love other people's animals, I just don't like animals in the house. Maybe a fish would be okay. Does this make me a butthole? When I went to her house one morning and she had a black eye. She said she tried to break up a fight that a friend of mine was involved in at a club. But later, a person I knew who worked at the club told me how she walked into the girl's bathroom at the club that night, shortly after the fight, and saw this girl punching herself in the eye. She had wanted the attention, I think. My good angel said don't stick with Mrs. Tyler Durden, no matter how sweet dat butt may be. That is a strange, strange level to go to for some kind of validation from your spouse. People are very strange, and I hope she's in a better place now. Was talking to my recently broken up with friend about this. I realized early on his girlfriend wasn't as smart as he was. And that's mean, and I do respect her, but the divide was significant. And mostly it wasn't that she was unintelligent, it was just that she constantly limited her own ability and relied instead on her prejudices and assumptions that were comfortable. Meanwhile, he's the kind of person who hears about something and runs to learn more, can have a thoughtful discussion and admit when he's wrong or when he didn't understand something at one point but does now. She's a great person, but because of the intellectual divide, the power balance of the relationship was horribly skewed. They went for about 5 years, but I think it shouldn't have lasted that long, and to be frank, they're both better off outside the relationship. When she cheated on me. Bum 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 bum. Don't worry about it, Reddit. I dodged a huge gosh darn bullet on that one. When she told me her list of ridiculous fears, started wearing children's clothing, said she started seeing crap and began to suck on pacifiers, and showered less. I was 16 at the time, but still, that's not normal at that age. That's not really normal for any age. When she started doing the deed with someone else while telling me she was going to her friend's cottage. When she moved out of the house while I was at work, but still wanted to stay together, because there was too much me in our house and not enough her. When she threatened to turn my social worker mum into child protective services. She was one of the longest-lasting, highly respected counselors in our community. My ex-girlfriend didn't like her and was a major B-word. This was nearly 2 years ago. It's true that there are bat-crap crazy people who think it's okay to start crap with people for no reason other than their own bat-crap emotions. It's also true that there are a large number of people in caretaking positions who do it because it gives them power over people and allows them to punch down on someone more vulnerable than themselves. The truth in this case? Who knows? When I had to ask for compliments because the never-ending slew of funny insults about my looks and intelligence were beginning to really get me down, his only nice thing to say about me was, "You've got a nice chest." When she told me I wasn't the same person I was before I went to Afghanistan and that she didn't like the person I am now. We just got busy with stuff and didn't feel like putting in the effort anymore. It was a long distance, too. It's a real shame because she was a wonderful person. We still talk, though, from time to time, which is nice. When I realized he talked to me the way he talked to his mother, he didn't like his mother and thought she was totally incompetent. He chose the worst times to tell me heartbreaking things, telling me he'd decided, after telling me otherwise for 2 years, that he never wanted kids, on my birthday, on our way home from my parents, calling me names, ignoring me, refusing to tell me why he was upset with me, and making me cry on the way to my parents for a party, making me lie about why my eyes were all puffy and red. In the end, he cheated on me, and I tried to get over it, but after a few months I realized it wasn't worth it and that he wasn't right for me. We stayed friends until something big happened last year, and I just don't want that kind of drama in my life. I dated a lot of the wrong guys after that, but came to realize exactly what I wanted in a partner, and so I didn't settle for anything that didn't feel right. Very happy now that I found the right person for me. We're planning on getting married and looking for a house this summer. When she dumped me over religion. Rest in peace, awesome relationship. It had been coming for a long time, little things here and there. By this point in our relationship, I felt like I was her servant. I was working 2 jobs to support us. I regularly dropped her off and picked her up from school. We had 2 vehicles, but she didn't like that parking was limited, so she'd have to leave really early to get a spot. It didn't matter if I only had 2 hours of sleep and had to be at work in 4 hours, she got a ride. I doubt she ever fixed her own dinner or got her own beverages if I was home. Didn't matter what I was doing or if what she was doing was unimportant. I regularly helped her with her homework, not just a little either. I'd basically do the research, write the paper, and then spell and grammar check it after she edited it into her own words. I did all of these things for her, but if I ever tried to say no, she'd make me feel like I was lazy. Like I never lifted a finger. She was the hard worker, and I didn't love her enough to do such simple things. Eventually, I wised up and realized we were not good for each other. I broke up with her. Except I chickened out the next morning and apologized. We stayed together for another year or so until she cheated on me. We had been dating for 4.5 years. We were best friends and it was working great, and he was planning the proposal. We thought we had everything figured out. My mum took me on a 2.5-week vacation to another country to visit relatives. I got back to the apartment that I shared with him before he was due home from classes and felt panic when I heard his keys at the door. I wasn't excited to see him. It was weird. It's not like we hadn't kept in touch the entire time I was gone, and it's not like anything had changed. But for some reason, it was just weird. Some part of me just knew. I grew distant and didn't talk to him as much. He brought up my strange behavior about a week later, and another weekend after that, we broke up. He moved out. We don't talk anymore because he loves me and it would hurt him. But sometimes I miss having him as my best friend. What's being in a coma like, and how did life change afterwards? My friend told me that while he was snowboarding, he hit a tree, fell unconscious and was airlifted to hospital and in a coma for 2 weeks. While he was in a coma, he remembers walking in a field, a wolf by his side, walking towards a tree in the distance. For days, he wasn't getting any closer to the tree, then suddenly he and the wolf got closer and closer until they were at the tree. The tree was beautiful and it had a face, but the face kept changing faces, from people he had met in the past to people he met later in life. The tree reached its hand out toward him and was holding a key. He grabbed the key from the tree, held it to his heart, and the wolf disappeared. The tree disappeared and he woke up. He now volunteers in a wolf sanctuary. I can't remember where, but I've heard similar stories. People climbing stairs endlessly, trying to reach an island by a boat, waiting for a plane to land. Only when they got to the top of the stairs, reached the island or the plane landed, and they got off, did they wake up. Honestly, still feeling the after effects some 7 months later. I always feel high, like a piece of me is gone and won't come back. I spent the first 6 weeks after waking up wondering who I was. I've been diagnosed with depersonalization derealization disorder. Look into it, there's a lot of us out there. It's so hard sometimes to get through it. I wake up every morning wondering if I'm even real. No one understands and they just give me Xanax to deal with the panic attacks. Walking in woods really helps me a lot, and just trying to be normal and doing things you used to helps. but there isn't a day that goes by that I don't feel like I'm back at square one. To anyone else going through this, all I can say is stay strong. I remember someone saying that they felt the same way you do after a coma, and they felt like they were in that twilight zone you're in when you first wake up from sleeping. He went bungee jumping off a bridge and had a fear of heights, and he said it was like someone flipped a switch and he felt normal again after that. I was in a medically induced coma for 2 weeks or so, and I was on a crap ton of medication and had some horrible hallucinations, an experience I'm told by ICU nurses is very common. I knew I was injured and in hospital. Apparently they kept waking me every day to check my brain function, but I was not aware of why, so I spent a lot of time very confused with vague hospital-based nightmares. Also, some Game of Thrones hallucinations, because my brother visited and talked about the show at my bedside, and I fought a dragon as a result in my head. I can't say exactly how much time passed because A, it was more than 2 years ago, and I've tried to forget, and B, things from the outside broke in, but from different times than you'd expect. A news story from 1 week into the coma felt like it was at the start of the hallucinations. But I might be remembering things wrong. The brain works in very mysterious ways, especially when you're high as frick. I don't remember waking up or learning about my accident, though I've been informed I had to be told every 30 minutes or so for the first few hours I was awake, as I'd start to panic and be confused. I only remember the day after I woke up, when I already knew what had happened. I wouldn't recommend the experience to anyone, though I did later get a tattoo of a dragon to commemorate it. So far, medically induced coma sounds much less pleasant than the accidental sort. I suppose that in the greater scheme of things, it's probably better to have something like this be controlled, though. I was born 3 months early and spent the first 6 weeks of my life alternating between an NICU incubator and ice baths for the extreme prolonged fever. Although I obviously survived a difficult infancy, my immune system is questionable at best. I've suffered from unexplained fevers, FUO, fevers of unknown origin, off and on throughout my life. When I was 19, I contracted an often fatal infectious disease. My parents were traveling out of the country, so I was home alone, and by the time I realized that I needed medical attention, I couldn't move. It was during this period that I began to slip in and out of consciousness. My older brother lived a few blocks away with his wife and kid. He was trying to be cool and let me party my butt off while my parents were gone, but after 3 days of radio silence, he started to get worried and came to my house to check on me. He found me in my bed, unconscious and radiating heat. He carried me down the stairs, put me in his car, and burned rubber to the ER. He broke 2 of my bones while doing this, but seeing as how I was 6'1", 180 pounds, and literally unconscious, it's not surprising. And before you ask, I have no freaking idea why he didn't just call 911 and let the paramedics do it. I was in hospital for 11 weeks, completely unconscious for 3 of them, and in and out of consciousness for 7 weeks. I have 6 or so extremely disjointed memories that, according to my brother and parents, take place over the next 3 weeks. One was of the sheer panic that ensued in the ER once they got a diagnosis and were trying to quarantine me and everyone who'd touched me. Another was of my parents standing over me weeping. There's absolutely no chronology to my memories themselves, but based on third-party accounts, I've been able to piece together the timeline of what happened to me. The moment that my parents stood over me weeping was right after the doctors told them to go home, get rest, and hit the funeral home the next morning to make my final arrangements. They were standing there weeping, trying to decide what to do, if listening to the physician was the right call. When I opened my eyes and looked around for less than 1 minute before slipping away again. That was all the time they needed to decide, screw that doctor, this is our kid. They never gave up and literally never left me alone again for the duration of my hospital visit. Remember those fevers I mentioned, the ones that I'd had since birth? Yeah, it turns out that a dangerously high, prolonged fever is what killed the virus I had. It also gave me thermal brain damage, but never mind, I'm alive. Just slightly dumber. If you've ever been under general anesthesia, you'll know what a coma is like. That's a kind of medically induced coma. If you haven't had that, it's not even like sleep. You're awake 1 minute and waking from surgery the next, with no awareness of what's happened in between, unless you wake up during surgery. That happened with me last time. I was having chest surgery. I tried to sit up on the operating table. Scared the crap out of the med students. No pain, just confusion, and I went back under pretty fast. Yes, some people do have different experiences with comas, and some people experience floating above their body under anesthesia and hallucinations and delusions. When I come out of anesthesia, I'm violent. Everyone is different, but the majority of people who've been in comas say it's the same thing as going under for an operation. This is kind of what I thought being in a coma was like. When I had surgery, the thing I was most worried about was going under general anesthesia, just because I'd never done it before. I had the needle put into the vein, the nurses were all joking around, no, I don't care that the anesthesia I'm getting is the same thing that killed Michael Jackson. Then I was wheeled into the operating room. They opened the tube and I felt the coolness of the anesthesia going into my vein, then nothing until I was waking up in the recovery room. No wakefulness, no hearing voices, and no passage of time. Simply nothing. Yeah, when I had my wisdom teeth out, my memory is exactly, "So we're going to put this in your arm here and we'll put you under in a minute." The procedure went well. It was like I blinked. Kinda terrifying, actually. Like every moment I could just wake up and be somewhere else. I feel like it would be really confusing if you had accidentally gone into a coma. Holy crap, I never thought I'd tell this story. I was in a car accident at 19 and in a coma for 3 months. A couple of weird things happened. First, I was fully aware of everything for a couple of days before actually waking up. I couldn't open my eyes or move or talk, but I heard and felt everything. It was terrifying because I honestly thought it would last forever. After 2 days of this, I fell asleep, and when I woke up, I was fully conscious and never more relieved in my life. I thought at first that I'd just slept for 3 months, but after a couple of weeks of being out of the coma, I started having the weird, most vivid recurring dreams and flashbacks of literally being another person. I'd never experienced anything like this before the coma. I'd never had a recurring dream in my life, but since the coma, I've had the same 4 or 5 dreams hundreds of times, and in each one I'm the same person, but not me. They're freaky, and I always wake up panicked and often find out that I'm sleepwalking as well. And that also never happened before the coma. I'm pretty convinced that during the coma, I lived some other life in a super long and intense dream. It's the only explanation I can come up with. I definitely recall reading about a guy who was in a coma or dream and lived a completely separate life. When he woke up, he was devastated because he had had a whole family, wife and children, in the dream and then they were gone. I've had vivid dreams just when I was lying in bed with a fever, so maybe it's just the default screensaver of an inactive brain. Mine after 2 days were pretty intense and skewed my reality out of whack, so I can imagine a brain's creation after 3 months would be a pretty rough illusion to be pulled out of. I was in a coma for 3 weeks nearly 3 years ago, nearly dying several times from double pneumonia and a strain of flu that was killing younger, healthier people. I remember precisely nothing. Little flashes of faces and pieces of dialogue maybe. Everything I know about that period was told to me by my parents, boyfriend at the time, and doctors and nurses. Maybe some people can hear what's going on around them while they're in a comatose state, but I wasn't one of them. My mum talked to me the whole time and read to me, hoping I could hear. I actually brought a book with me to the ER since it's not like I was expecting the coma, so she found that and read from it. It was The Bedroom Life of Catherine M. When I awoke, I wasn't confused or anything. I recognized that I was in a hospital room, and I remember being in the ER weeks before. It was the last thing I remembered. I thought maybe I'd been there a couple of days and had just slept off the worst of it. Then I saw the dry erase board on the wall in front of me where someone had thoughtfully written the date. My first thought? I'm so tired. My second thought? I can't move. My third thought was, I can't talk? What the frick is this thing in my throat? Get it out! Get it out! Get it out! Turns out the coma is the good part. The recovery afterward, learning to walk again because your muscles have atrophied, waiting for your voice to come back because you've been intubated all this time, trying to pee without help, and oh man, really trying hard to not get depressed. That's the crap show. Epilogue, after I woke up, 1,000 doctors and nurses came in to gawk at me and called me a miracle because apparently that's how close I was to death. The ones that helped me survive kept asking if I remembered them, which made me nuts. Like, I know they spent their entire work shifts for 3 weeks with me, but I was comatose, so sorry, no, I don't remember you. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was in a car accident when I was 17 and was in an induced coma for 2 weeks. I remember bits and pieces. I remember one thing in particular right before being taken off the medication. I remember being told I needed to stop moving because I'd been in a wreck. I remember looking around and seeing 2 midget doctors jumping from one bed to another trying to get to me. They were wearing full-size medical gear that dragged on the floor behind them. They got to my bed and put more medicine in me. I looked back and they jumped off the bed and started walking out the door, laughing. After I was woken from the coma, I asked about the midget doctors. Turns out there weren't any midget doctors. You were in a midget hospital, but then they moved you. Last year, at the end of July, my transplant kidney was failing and I'd caught pneumonia. Doctors were like, "We're gonna put you under for a few days," and I was like, "What do you mean under?" Well, they told me and I called my parents across the United States. Little did I know I'd wake up 5 weeks later. Apparently, it was a fight. I woke to my parents at my side. I thought it was just a day or two, but yeah, 5 weeks had passed and no one told me it was September till I was up for like a week. Missed my 33rd birthday last year. Well, I had really vivid dreams that were mostly great. I'll go into detail about the dreams mainly because I really haven't done it before. Traveling places, seeing things, crazy parties on charter planes with tigers and motorcycles. I can accurately recall about 5 to 10 of them. Then I had one particular nightmare that was really scary, that was like Mario meets dialysis in a 007 GoldenEye bunker. Mind you, my transplant kidney failed while I was under, so they had to put me back on dialysis without my acknowledgement. But that was the only part I can recall. I remember swimming somewhere tropical like Hawaii or something, and the water was really thick, but I could still almost breathe. Then another one that was probably the strangest and most laughable. I remember being suddenly in some Asian skyscraper in some fast food joint of all places, trying to play this motorcycle game so I could win money to Uber back home. Then laughing to myself because that would take a lot of money to Uber back from Asia. That one was really weird and felt like Inception or something. The frickin' Matrix. In terms of input, 2 things stuck out. My mum on that plane telling me not to do substances, and the other one was doing yoga with Bindi Irwin. Well, when I woke in September, I was still foggy, but I remembered all of those dreams pretty accurately. I thought I was just having a lot of strange dreams. The Bindi input was apparently because my parents had been watching television and she had been on Dancing with the Stars or was training for it or something. So basically, I was atrophied to crap. I was out for 5 weeks, didn't stand for 10 weeks, didn't walk till 12 weeks. About a total of 7 to 8 months recovery, but was still rough around the edges for most of this year, 2016. Doing much better though. It was the single most horrible 2 weeks of my life. I was put in a coma for 2 weeks and I heard everything. I screamed at myself to wake up, but I couldn't move at all. I stared at my eyelids for 2 weeks, screaming to get up, but was completely paralyzed. I heard my family at my bedside. I felt my girlfriend brushing my hair out of my eyes. I felt the nurse give me a dry bath, but I couldn't move. It was the worst experience of my life. I had surgery. It was 9.5 hours. I didn't wake up. I have one memory of a nurse slapping and screaming at me in the recovery room, then nothing. It was like a TV that was unplugged. The next thing I knew, I woke up to a priest saying last rites over me. I'm not Catholic. I croaked at him to F off because I wasn't going to die. He flees. A nurse comes running in and says I've been in a coma for 4.5 days. I experienced nothing. I was here and then I was gone. Then I was back and it was instantaneous. There was no sensation of the passage of time for me.
Who invited the priest? It seems weird that he just showed up.
Oh my god, the devil has risen! Flee! Well, it sounds like our friend here lived out a low-budget Exorcist sequel upon returning to the world of the living. I wonder if that priest aged a few years from the shock. Mine was like a really long, vivid dream. Like me in my own body performing these actions that I know have happened before, but all I can do is spectate. Like replaying a video. I pretty much relived entire chunks of my life ranging from hours to days long. I was out for a month. I was in a medical coma due to going septic from a kidney stone. Previous to the coma, I was basically in a room and every time I fell asleep, a crash cart and doctors woke me up. They brought me to surgery and I woke up a week later, but during the coma, I was having a nightmare that was so real that when I did come out of it, I was convinced it happened to me. I dreamt that I was transferred from the hospital to a doctor's house to recover. They had me in a recliner that I couldn't sit up from, and there was a fireplace with a TV in front of me. In the dream, it was someone's birthday at the doctor's house, and any time I called out to ask for help, I was treated roughly and rudely. When I did wake up, I noticed a few things in my room resembled the dream. The bed I was in made it nearly impossible to move. Although my legs were useless and I had to relearn to walk, the room had glass windows in front of me and on the side. And there was a nurse that I remembered that was the only nice person in my dream. My husband said that I seemed lucid and he would ask me questions and get answers. But I don't remember any of that. I went in the night of my son's birthday at the end of July and got out mid-August. It was hell. In 2008, I had to undergo a series of operations to remove a brain tumor that was very close to my brainstem. After the first operation, I'd apparently developed some sort of trouble regulating my blood pressure, and it kept spiking and falling. So the decision was made to put me into a coma. This has never been explained to me and my memories are very hazy. If any neurologists or neurosurgeons here could tell me the logic, I'd love to hear it. What I mostly remember is having a bad night where I couldn't sleep, because the nurse kept fiddling with my IV. My dad was there, but I had no sense of anything that was wrong. I was just tired. Finally, I fell asleep. When I woke up, I was very weak and sore. It felt like I'd slept for 14 hours, but it was something like 12 days. I have no memories of the interim at all. Just like surgery, 1 second you're there and 1 second you're waking up. You never even know that you're gone. In a weird way, this settled all of my fears of death, too. Either the lights go out and we literally never know it, or there's some sort of eternal reward or punishment. If it's lights out, well, I've been there and there's nothing to fear. If it's a reward or punishment, Pascal's wager applies. Since there's no way to know which belief system is right, pick the one that works for you, don't be a butthole, and pray. Although I've never been in a coma, I did go through an experience which is one of the strangest things to happen to me. When I was 19, I visited my aunt during the summer holidays. I was playing my cousin's PlayStation, although I was tired from the journey since I didn't get any proper sleep on the bus and had been awake for over 24 hours. I suddenly started getting an epileptic seizure and fainted. My mum and aunt screamed and tried to wake me up. The neighbors came in, hearing the noise, and took their car to take me to the hospital. They brought me to the hospital and I didn't regain consciousness until almost 3 hours later. The crazy part is this, which my aunt told me later, was that when I lost consciousness, I was still able to get up, put on the jacket and get out the door, and in the elevator, get in my car, set on my way to the hospital, opened the door of the car and walked into the hospital before collapsing on the bed. I had absolutely zero recollection of any of this after I regained consciousness. I was in a coma after a car accident where I sustained a brain injury. The last thing I remember was pulling out of my friend's driveway a couple of times away from where we got into the accident. The next thing I remember was waking up in the hospital a few days later. No passage of time, no angels, no meeting with a god who sent me back, just literally nothing in between those two memories, just waking up in a hospital bed. On top of this, I suffered from anterograde amnesia for 11 months after the accident. Though I was conscious and functioning in daily life, I didn't retain any long-term memory. The last thing I remember, albeit briefly, is waking up in the hospital in July 2005. My next clear memory I know I remember is around the time I graduated high school in June 2006. I don't remember anything about my senior year. Sometimes people tell me stories about stuff I did, and it seems like it could have happened to me, but I don't actually recall it firsthand. My mum said one night I showed up at home with a ripped shirt and scratches, and someone's weave in my hand. No idea what happened. I don't think we'll ever know. Not me personally, but a friend of a friend whose story is semi-famous. He's an avid, venomous snake collector with a formidable collection. One day he was handling his king cobra, which decides to make a go at him and nips him in the arm. He assumes it's a dry bite and isn't worried about it, but starts to head toward the hospital just in case. Halfway there, he starts getting very dizzy and sweating profusely. He has to pull over and lay down in the grass because it gets so bad. Calls 911 at this point, and an ambulance gets there in a few minutes to find him struggling for breath. They get to the hospital when the search for antivenom begins, but the only Cobra antivenom nearby was expired. They have a guy fly some in from a neighboring state, but the guy's respiratory system shuts down before the antivenom gets there. Cobra toxin kills people by paralyzing their diaphragm, so luckily they were able to keep him alive by intubating. He was in a coma for 2 or so weeks, and although paralyzed completely, he could hear everything going on, including his family trying to decide whether or not to pull the plug. How crazy. My girlfriend, recently passed, was in a coma from late January to mid-February of this year. She experienced a complete different reality in which someone named Benny saved her from freezing to death on a city bus and gave up his life in the process. She slowly realized it wasn't real after awaking from her coma. But 2 weeks after awakening, I asked her who she liked more, Benny or myself. She thought about it for a bit and said, "Well, he did save my life." Mid-March, when she was released from hospital, she would still tear up when thinking about Benny. I was in a 5-day coma when I was 17, 2013. I was hit by a car and fractured my skull. I don't remember the impact of the accident, but I remember being pulled into a grass yard. I remember the ambulance doors closing. I remember getting to the hospital and then I woke up. There was no concept of time and I ended up losing a bit of my short-term memory as well as having to relearn how to walk. People who've had friends stab you in the back, what's the story? Made plans to go see a movie with my friends for my 16th birthday and planned it weeks in advance. Everyone bailed the day before or on the day, but I decided to go and see the movie anyway. Ran into my whole group of friends leaving the movie theater while buying popcorn. I confronted them. Yeah, a lot of hemming and hawing, with no real explanation and no apology. Still went to see my movie, Underworld, and learned a valuable lesson about people and friends. Sucked at the time, but eventually that lesson was a great birthday gift. It started the process of not showing up for a majority of things and only making brief appearances for a month or so. Then I got to play D&D with some people from jazz band and never really looked back. Best friend stopped talking to me after my dad died. Took the whole friend group with him. Apparently, I was too emotional. I was 13, Having my entire friend group walk away from me when I was in such a crappy place stuck with me forever. This was similar to my experience as well. I lost my father at 9 years old and all but one of my friends ditched me because they didn't know how to deal with a person in grief. I'm still close with the friend that stayed 21 years later. I hope everything is going well for you now. I asked 2 of my friends if they wanted to live together in college. Then one of them asked another person in our friend group if he wanted to join in as well. Then they asked another and another. And then once there were too many friends for one apartment, they dropped me out of it. No longer friends with any of them. Was kind of a wake-up call though, because I definitely gave way too much of myself to those people, not knowing I was the most expendable one. It really taught me not to put others on a pedestal and respect myself more, and has since led to me developing more healthy relationships that bring me a lot of happiness. I had one friend, Ben. I was bullied by everyone at elementary school. Because Ben was worried about being bullied too when they hung out with me at school, we only played outside of school. One day, a popular kid asked to play with me during recess. I was ecstatic, until after a while they said, "You're not as bad as that Ben person said you are." And that's how I learned why I was bullied. She slept with my boyfriend because she thought she was in love with me. Wackest crap I ever did hear. Well, they do say that if you do the deed with someone, you're doing it with everyone they've ever done it with. So in a way, she might have fulfilled a goal. Sucks though. I had my 17th birthday and invited my mates to go get a drink at a bar. Everyone accepted, but no one came. After a few hours of drinking alone and phone calls not getting picked up, I saw on Instagram that they were at an electro party having a good time. Apparently they were pre-gaming without me and spontaneously decided to go to this event and forgot about me. Everyone said sorry, but it still haunts me. Don't celebrate my birthday ever since then. I once had a really sad 25th birthday. I never usually celebrate them. Most of the time I just grab 1 or 3 friends and go to a restaurant with them. But this time I wanted to celebrate a bit bigger. I invited 3 different friend groups to a barbecue in the park. I honestly have no clue how this happened, but in the end I was the butt of every joke. Everyone just made fun of me the whole time till it got really annoying and even made a "you can't sit with us, we found new friends" jokes. I had a really hard time talking to anybody because no one really paid attention to me. So most of the time I was sitting alone on my blanket and just got made fun of when I wanted to chime in on a conversation. It was the worst birthday ever, and no one understood why I was so teed off in the end. I even told them the whole evening that they were going a bit overboard with their jokes. I mean, sure, it's nice having a different friend group connect with each other, but on my expense? Screw you. That's why for my 30th birthday I just grabbed 5 really awesome and good friends and went to the zoo. Several of my housemates decided to move to the West Coast after college. There was one who was planning on going with them that they didn't want to keep living with. They waited to tell her until after they'd driven out over spring break to look at apartments, in her car. Pretty gross, and it really messed with her. I was taking a culinary class with my buddy and he walked behind me with a knife and didn't say anything. I stepped back and got mildly stabbed in the lower back. After 10 years of friendship, you think you know a guy. Wait. Am I answering this right? I had a whole group of friends in high school who one day, out of nowhere, turned against me and brought the entire year group with them. No one spoke with me, were extremely cold for a good 6 months. I even got calls from one girl every day from a blocked number telling me to self-delete. It wasn't until a group project started and the group said the exact same thing. Wow, you're really not like how your old friends said you were. They never told me what was said, so to this day I have no idea what the heck happened here. This happened to a friend of mine. We were friends in middle school but then went to different high schools. We're nerds, so we kind of expect abuse, but what he got there was vicious. I started dating a girl from his school, and upon finding out we were friends, she said, "Why are you friends with him? He does inappropriate things with kids." Turns out he certainly didn't, he was just gay. Someone spread this rumor as a hyperbole because he came on to her brother who's a year younger. People just abandoned all reason and chose to believe the delicious gossip. Been very good friends for over 2 years. Their roommate moved out and they asked me if I wanted to move into their spare room. I was very happy to live with my good friends and I did everything I could to be the best roommate possible. After 3 weeks, they found another source of income and kicked me out. First, they offered to help me find another accommodation, but the next day they changed their mind and just told me to leave by the end of the month. It was 7 days away. They didn't speak to me ever since. When we met somewhere in town, they acted like they'd never seen me before. I have no freaking idea what I did wrong. My friends told me to grieve better after my boyfriend died. Some people are just terrible with dealing with the grieving. They're great for a little while, but at some point it just becomes an irritation whenever it's brought up. Grief gives no Fs. It'll hit you, fade, hit, fade, and then mostly settle down. Then 7 Christmases later, it shows up in a panic attack. It's different for everyone and often very different for every death. A quiet girl I made friends with would only sit with me in class just so she could go snitch about me to my ex-friends. She'd literally sit next to me for 1 or 2 classes, randomly, and then go and sit with them. I called her out on it after she came to sit next to me and told her, "Why do you even bother sitting with me when we just know you're just trying to get crap to talk about me with them? When I come back from the bathroom, you'd better go sit somewhere else." I was usually very quiet, and that was the first time I'd stood up for myself. I had one friend who honestly wasn't my favorite person because she was really manipulative. But I never said anything bad about her. I found out later she had been crap-talking me to all of our mutual friends and telling them that I did horrible things that I'd never done. Ended up essentially being pushed out of that entire friend group, and it ruined a lot of my high school experience. Village gossips. Personally, I'm just happy I'm not part of that miserable group anymore. As one wise man said, empty cans rattle the most. I had a best friend that I knew for 16 years. She got pregnant and her parents tried to kick her out. Her parents wanted her to get a termination, but she refused. One of our high school friends told me someone should push her down a flight of stairs. I told her that's a very bad idea and defended my best friend. The next day, the principal came by my class to ask me if I could attend a meeting about something important. If I didn't attend, I was going to be expelled. When I arrived at the meeting, our shared friend claimed I was going to shove my best friend down a flight of stairs. My best friend had believed her. We stopped talking after that. Oosh. Well, she might have eventually found out how reliable that other friend was if that's the one she chose to keep around. Stressful situation for her. I guess the lapse in judgment isn't down to cruelty. We, my husband and I, had a friend that we helped get back on his feet. Paid off some tickets he had, got his license reinstated, hooked him up with a solid connection for a reasonable, well-running car to replace his beater, and gave him a place to live and a job, automotive repair. He decided it was a better choice to tell all our customers we were overcharging them. Spoiler, we weren't, and he'd do the jobs cheaper if they'd bring it to him at his house. This was a short time after he moved out of our house after never repaying anything he owed us. Not that we'd asked. It really broke my heart. Some will take as much as they possibly can. Now he stops by occasionally like nothing ever happened. It's been years now, but some crap doesn't heal right. My wife said she needed some time to herself, so she went to stay at her mum's for a while. One day, I went to pick up my kids and walked in on her and my best friend doing the deed. Turns out it had been going on for a while and she knew him before she knew me, which I had no clue about. To clarify a few things. 1. When I said the affair had been going on for a while, I mean for several months before I found out. This was after my second son was born. I have no doubt as to whether my kids are actually my own or not. 2. Yes, they are now my ex-wife and ex-best friend. 3. This happened nearly 16 years ago now. It was a very dark period of my life, but I'm great now. I got 2 great kids out of the relationship. I wouldn't have met my wife if this hadn't happened. Also, I believe I'm a stronger person having gone through the whole ordeal. 4. Just know that if you're going through something horrible in your life and your heart and mind are broken, there is hope for things to get better. It just takes time. This would prompt me to conduct a DNA test on the kids. I hope the results don't break your heart. I was worried about that years ago, but both are now teenagers and clearly resemble myself and their mum. Had a good bud of mine, who's the godfather of my son, living with me and my wife. I travel a lot for work and was out of the country for about 6 months in the Middle East. Came back and found out she was preggers with twins and that they weren't mine. Best friend for 8 years, started sleeping with my girlfriend, later wife, a week after I introduced them. Took 6 years after my son was born to find out that they'd meet up a few times a month. Was a chance he wasn't mine. Luckily, he is. The problem is that the closeness you have to the person blinds you to the idea that they could do anything so terrible. My best friend is one of the smartest guys I know, always on top of it when someone is being the least bit cool or he's getting screwed. Then his wife swore that she must have gotten a transmissible disease from a toilet seat. He believed her and even got mad at his good friends for saying she could be lying until he caught her cheating 6 months later. Love makes fools of us all, I guess. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Years ago, when I did a health sciences undergraduate degree, most of the cohort was determined to get into medical school. Our medical school program mainly accepted students from only our competitive undergraduate course, due to subject prerequisites. We all knew each other and were friendly, hanging out together and forming study groups. Many of my friends were great. We shared tips, resources, practiced exams and interviews together, but there were a handful who really wanted to get into medical school, and since the program ranks applicants mainly based on undergraduate results, the better your friends perform, the lower your ranking is for selection. So near application time, some of us would head off to the university library to borrow our textbooks to find chapters or page numbers that the lecturer mentioned would be on the exam. And they would be ripped out. You'd go and find another library copy of the textbook and that page would be ripped out too. All of them totally removed in a hurry. I didn't believe that someone from our cohort did it until interview practice began. Students began obtaining copies of the questions from previous years and lying when others asked if they had it. I saw someone give a terrible, awful interview answer, and the other student would give them glowing feedback and inform them they should say that, word for word, during the interview. It was a crap show, and a lot of relationships fell apart or were never the same again. In the UK, I've heard of similar practices for pupilages. Not sure if that's the right word, but trainee barristers. One girl got offered 2 places and was discussing with us which one to take, and her best friend left the room. Turned out she'd called one of them pretending to be her friend, then calling to decline a place and recommend herself. Fortunately, they found out, but sadly this was apparently common enough for them to be familiar with this kind of scam. I booked a table for 6 people to watch a sports event at a bar. I told them so. All 5 friends said, "Okay, we'll be there." No one shows up or even has the decency to call or text that they weren't coming. This just happened to my 11-year-old sister, BBBS, and I was heartbroken for her. She had a slumber party planned with about 4 friends and she'd been talking about it for over a month. Halloween is her favorite and she had all these cute, not too scary slumber party plans and crafts we'd made a couple of weeks ahead of time that had truth or dares in them. None of them came. They all forgot to tell their parents. I suggested maybe next year she makes paper invitations that her friends can give their parents so they for sure know about it. Turns out that's exactly what she did and they still messed it up somehow. Ugh. My friend told me they weren't doing anything for their birthday. On the day of their birthday, photos appeared on Facebook of them out with the rest of our friends. They're not my friends anymore. Frick, man. One of my most painful memories from elementary school was when I saw one of my friends showing other kids pictures from her birthday party that happened the weekend prior. Almost all of my good friends were there having a blast with her, except me, obviously. She seemed remorseful when she realized that she forgot to invite me, but we were never as close after that, and we were pretty good friends with each other, too. A woman I thought was my friend. We worked together for years and our kids were friends. I helped her and her husband out when he was having mental health problems. She was in my sister's wedding party, appeared in court as a witness for my ex-wife in her bid to gain full custody. Thankfully, she failed and I now have custody of my kids. I haven't spoken to my friend since. A guy who seemed like a good mate when it was just us, and then as soon as there was someone else or a group, he took the mickey out of me and tried to make me the butt of all his jokes. Even worse if there were girls around. After a while, I called him out on it and he was just like, "Dude, it's just a joke." But I was done with him after that. I saw him randomly earlier this year after years of no contact, and it was amicable, and we caught up a bit on how we were getting on with our own lives, and while he's grown up and become a bit more grounded, there's been no intention of rebuilding a bridge. I think if I ever met someone that has that side to their personality, I'd drop them like a hot potato. I think we all have at least one nasty experience with people like this growing up. Teens are gnarly. I hope that these experiences with grown adults are fewer and further between. My D-bag of a brother did this to his best friend of all time. After about 6 years of this, his friend couldn't stand it anymore and cut my brother off. My brother is so arrogant he still can't see the problem. Why didn't he just keep being my victim? That's the way things were. It was his place. I don't get it. In 2014, I woke up January 1st in horrible pain. I ended up needing an emergency surgery to remove my gallbladder. I was a single mum to 2 kids under 5 and had just moved back to my hometown after living out of state. We'd had to leave a really crappy living situation and had only been back about a month, and I hadn't found a job at that point. I'd had a really close family friend who had been living with me before I'd moved back, and he ended up homeless, so I bought him an $80 bus ticket and got him back to our hometown and let him stay with me for a few days. He quickly found another place to stay, but we'd invited him to my youngest son's 2nd birthday, which is the 6th of January. I was like 4 days out from surgery at this point and could barely make it down the stairs at this point, so he offered to go and pick up pizza and cake for my son and me. We didn't have a huge party or anything. I was on food stamps and had cash assistance, since my son's dad was not involved at all and he didn't pay child support. Even so, I offered for him to get himself a small pizza to take back to the girl he was staying with, since her and her kids couldn't make it over. So the party goes great and everyone has a good time, especially both my kids. A few days later, my grandma was going to do grocery shopping for me, so I go to get my card and realize it's not there. I never got it back from that guy, and I forgot he had it since I was on pain meds from surgery. I tried calling him like 5 times and he didn't answer, so I got to my account online to check my balance and he took everything. I had like $600 in cash, paid my rent and brought my kids the things they needed, and then I had about $750 in food stamps. All of it was gone. He let the girl he was staying with convince him to steal the money from me. I'd only used the money to buy the bus ticket and the pizza and cake for my son since I'd been in hospital for the first 4 days of the year, and only home for 2 after that. It's still to this day the most intentionally messed up thing anyone's ever done to me, mostly because he was such a huge FU to my kids. Like, who steals from a single mum recovering from a life-saving surgery on her kid's birthday? Especially after I helped him, like holy crap. Growing up in the same church and met my friend and her family when I was 14. We grew up together, hung out, and our families would be together all the time. Fast forward many years and I'm dating a guy that I fell in love with for almost 3 years at the time. He went to North Dakota to the oil fields for work. I went to visit him and could tell something was off a bit. Took the train from my town to Williston, 22 hours to get there. Visited him for 5 days, and on the last day he gets up and goes to the shower. I grab his phone. We had an open policy with each other that either could be on each other's phones. I found the emails between my friend and him. My family still hangs out with her family and her. I refuse to be around or speak to her. My best friend since 4th grade, called her my soul sister. I genuinely was so grateful to have what I thought our friendship was. She fell on hard times and got weirdly religious and stopped working while going to a private university. I was always there for her, shoulder to cry on, visited her all the time because she didn't have any friends and I knew she was lonely. I helped her with groceries and rent, helped her family out. One day she came over, and after buying her groceries, she told me that a higher power had been telling her to cut me off for 2 years and she had to listen. Now she wants to be friends again. It's a hard nope from me, dog. I had some friends who were always talking crap about me. Found out from another good friend. And one day, I came to school in my brand new jeans that cost around €150, and they put glue on my chair while I was in the bathroom. I sat on it. I asked which of them did it, and none of them said a word. We went to the principal's office, and these pieces of crap had the gall to say that I put it there to get them in trouble. Their parents were called, and I earned around €200 for a new pair of jeans. In 7th grade, she wrote a 10-page letter on all the reasons I should self-delete, and had all but one of my friends sign an agreement after I confided in her that I felt like something was wrong with me. Early undiagnosed depression, go figure. The day she gave it to me was arguably the worst day of my life at that point because my parents had told my sister and I that they were considering divorce and my grandmother had died. My parents ended up solving their issues and are happier than ever. I've been in therapy for a while and it's had wonderful results along with a pretty good mood stabilizer. I'm happier and healthier than I've ever been, and honestly the best thing for me was to completely cut her out of my life. Everyone that signed an agreement has long since cut contact with her and apologized to me. Just happened today, actually. I threw a housewarming party for myself and invited about 20 people over. It's been 5.5 hours and no one has shown up or bothered to call. I specified no gifts and supplied about $250 worth of food and drinks that'll go to waste now. My best friend begged my girlfriend to go south of the border on him. That was pretty brutal. F you, Ben. A friend stole my Mortal Kombat 2 strategy guide in 3rd grade. I never forgave him. Eat crap, Cameron, doo-doo head. Friend was really close with me and my girlfriend. Friend was my girlfriend's confidant while we were dating. I trusted that friend because he was a good guy up to that point. Friend was constantly pinning her against me and making bigger deals out of small stuff, saying I was mistreating her by not being with her constantly because I was working a full-time job while in school. The girlfriend cheated on me with her friend. He tried to turn everyone against me. The only person who still associates with that friend is the girlfriend, and they're getting married in the next few months. What was one rule at your office that ruined everything? I worked for a place that did RMA repairs on PCs. Most of our clients were businesses like hospitals and factories. Anyway, as I was touring the workshop during my orientation, the guy taking me around took me to the QA department. Once all builds or repairs were made, they were sent to the QA department for a final inspection before going out to the customer. The guy jokingly said, "We used to pay the QI guys bonuses for every mistake they found on the build." I started laughing. The only problem was it wasn't a joke. They actually paid bonuses to the QA people who found mistakes on builds. For anyone not familiar with the internal workings of a PC, it could take less than 3 seconds to completely render a computer inoperable. Hell, you could loosen a connection just by inspecting it. Luckily, that policy ended before I was hired. I mean, can you imagine giving someone a bonus for finding screw-ups when it would take almost no effort to make a screw-up and then claim you found it? New manager got rid of the sofa in the break room so people couldn't nap in their hour-long lunch break. No one was oversleeping or taking the mickey with it, but it was a good option to have on a tough day. A guy who liked green herbs started sleeping in other places, including in between the walls in the warehouse. To clarify where he'd go, we'd find him in between the walls and shelves. It was a DIY store that had been something else years before, so there were random partition walls and oddly laid out shelving units everywhere. A real crap show of a store layout. He had quite a few places to hide in and to nap. That's when we started losing him and couldn't find him as he'd go into a deeper sleep and was less likely to be disturbed. He didn't lose his job somehow. That place had a hard time hiring. We got a new manager for our office. She was an outside hire and was trying to prove herself quickly, and she was obsessed with efficiency. So her first week here, she sent us out this very rudely worded email about employees eating at our desks. We have a very small break area, 4 tables, and we have about 300 employees here, and that we all had to stop eating at our desks because it was not efficient to eat and try to work at the same time. Through a coordinated effort by some of the more sassy people at the office, they all had their lunches at the same time and filled the break room with about 90 people, elbow to elbow, and they all ate standing up. Literally the next day after that happened, she sent out a follow-up email saying that we could eat at our desks, but she advised us to take a break from our work from time to time. It was pretty funny. Good old malicious compliance. There's nothing like it. Whether it's sticking it to obnoxious customers or your superiors, it brings me such joy. At a former job, software development, there was a foosball table. People would play reasonably often, but just one game to take a break. One day, management came down to the software engineering floor and saw people playing foosball in the middle of the afternoon. They declared no foosball until 4:30 p.m. That ended up making it so that everybody knew when there would be other people wanting to play foosball, so it was much easier to find somebody willing to play and significantly increased the amount of foosball played at work. I'm a programmer. On a previous job, the developers and teams were measured by the number of feature requests that they completed. We figured out how to subdivide everything to blow it up into the maximum number of feature requests possible. A manager might request a new report. We set up separate feature tickets for Create Button, Make Button Blue, Make Button Respond when clicked, Implement Business Logic, Display Results in Grid, Allow sorting of grid, and so on. We'd subdivide a one-day task into 20 one-hour tasks. Our management loved it. Our team looked 20 times as productive despite deliberately slowing ourselves down with red tape. Ugh, so accurate it hurts. Especially the management loved it part. Malicious compliance mixed with scope creep. My company, as part of its alcohol policy, said you shouldn't drink for at least 4 hours before coming to work. When engineers got called about production problems over the weekend, they'd all just had a beer, but could be there in about 4 or 5 hours. I'm a flight attendant. Rule is we can't drink 8 hours before our shift. Sometimes the company will call you after you've just done working to do more flying as they don't have anyone else. Or we might have an extra long overnight, as in get into whichever city, say at around 11 p.m. Monday, and not leave until 6 a.m. Wednesday. Sometimes they'll call us out to work some short flights on that Tuesday that we aren't working. All you have to do is answer the phone and say you just had a drink, and then you don't have to work. An insane amount of time and hand-wringing went into my office's dress code policy. When the final draft was ultimately released, every department head had a valid reason why their staff should be exempted. So the policy wound up only affecting myself and the guy that insisted on making the policy. I violate this policy on a daily basis. I used to work for a production company that employed a lot of really skilled, award-winning editors. There were producers and executives and directors, but the real money makers, the people who really made the company, were the editors, so the company was basically centered around them. The executives would always order in food for the editors, and the editors would usually eat in their offices while doing their thing. One day, the execs decided to cut paid lunches to save money. The editors all thought this was a jerk move, so they'd go out for lunch and sometimes stay out for like 3 hours. There was nothing the company could do, really, because these editors were top of their game, and if Warner Bros. Heard that the editors they always used had left, they might leave too. So the company couldn't do anything. They saved maybe $15 per person per day, but lost like 4 hours per person per day as well. When trimming a budget, you may want to remove things that are the most expensive and provide the least noticeable benefit. So of course, the first thing to always go is creature comforts, which cost almost nothing and have immense impact on quality of life. I'm perpetually amazed at many companies' existence. You're assuming they want to remove the things that make sense to remove. What actually happens is they remove the easiest things to remove, basically all the low effort, low capital, and low time investment things. What's the easiest thing a manager could possibly do to save money? Simply stop buying lunches for people. It takes one email and the manager can claim $50,000 annual savings on day one to their bosses. This is why layoffs that end up hurting the company financially occur. Labor is the easiest go-to when you have to cut costs quickly. Companies are starting to realize this in manufacturing at least and have been focusing on decreasing specific costs rather than fixed. Depends on your industry though. Some have very low fixed labor costs like 5 to 10%, whilst others can be higher than 50. In the 5 to 10% cases, it might actually save your company money to go and hire more people, but many people are very reluctant to do so. My old job had a draconian attendance policy in which if you were a second late, you got a half-point demerit. If you were an hour late, you got that same half-point demerit, with certain amounts of demerits meaning different kinds of warnings or termination. In addition to making for some of the most anxiety-filled employees that made dumb decisions to speed through snowstorms, it also meant if you got stuck in a traffic jam, you might as well just take your time, stop for gas, and get breakfast. The same place also had a similar policy that assured the plague spread through the whole place. Say you came into work at 7. By 9 a.m., you've got a fever and full-blown flu symptoms. If you clock out then, you get a whole point demerit. But if you sit there coughing and shivering and infecting your coworkers for another 2 hours, till your shift was half over, you only got a half-point demerit. The sickness policy is shockingly dumb. If everyone gets sick because one person can't leave, then productivity goes down a huge amount, if not shutting down operations entirely until enough people are healthy again. I'm surprised that wasn't revoked after the first time, but some managers can't manage anything. As someone who used to work in hospitality, where when you got sick you'd be asked to come in anyway because nobody else could replace you, I can tell you what a relief it is to now work in a situation where I can choose to take a sick day or two, or just power through in our post-pandemic work-from-home environment. My dad was a corpsman with the Marines doing high desert training in the Mojave. They had a big problem with unidentified snake bites. People would get bit but not identify the snake, so it was hard to find the right antidote. So my dad got all the Marines in a room and said, "If you get bit by a snake, bring it back here so we can identify it." Not even a full week later, they had to alter the wording a bit because a Marine was bit by a rattlesnake and decided to bring it back without killing it. This man had carried the snake all the way back to base alive, and the snake decided to let him know exactly how he felt about that by repeatedly biting his arm the entire time. Needless to say, that Marine went home and they made sure to hold another meeting where they told everyone to kill the snake, then bring it back. In the end, he kept the arm. They got him to the base hospital in roughly 50 minutes and gave him antivenom. He was out for 6 weeks. This was in 1995 at 29 Palms. He calls it 29 Stumps. 4th Marine Division, Reservist Marines out of Buffalo, New York. My work just recently tried to implement a new attendance policy that didn't last 24 hours. They changed it so that after 2 unexcused absences in a year, you were fired. An unexcused absence is any absence or tardiness. I think you were allowed 4 tardies. When you didn't give your boss more than 24 hours notice. Lock the doors on the HR person that came up with that. Add it to their one previous absence. Fire them, fix the policy, rehire them to teach them a lesson. Don't do anything unless directed by your boss. Any deviation from this will result in write-up and termination. This was a very literal directive from upper management that took place after an office incident. Our work is very fluid and our team alone contained 20 people. Needless to say, productivity hit unfounded lows. Yep, we had this. We couldn't even ask our managers if there was any work to be done. They just emailed us with work every hour. I ended up finishing it in like 10 minutes of the email and was bored out of my brain for the majority of the day.
This is literally a labor strategy to have a strike without leaving the workplace open for scabs. And to prevent retaliation from the bosses. It's called work to rule or a rulebook slowdown. I work for a labor union representing airport catering workers, and this is a strategy we've used in the past with great success. The rules and procedures in place with the company and the unsafe, unsanitary rules the workers are expected to follow are 2 very different things. So we start implementing safety first days. The workers show up to work as normal and then spend the day following every company procedure to the letter. Productivity plummets, deadlines aren't met, and flights on major airlines leave without in-flight meals. The flyers get upset with the airline gets upset with the airport gets upset with the catering company, and the managers responsible for the poor working conditions are set directly in the crosshairs. It's been very effective. I worked for a software company that routed all sales that came to under $100,000 to inside sales, while larger orders went to outside sales teams that worked directly with the customers. This lasted until one of the inside sales guys convinced the customer that they didn't need the $2 million software and only the $100,000 upgrade. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. At one job, you could schedule vacation and give it back if your plans changed. One guy would take 2 weeks off, wait until the schedule was made for that month, then give it back. Since the schedule assumed he wasn't going to be there, he'd make up his own shifts since he was extra. This would lead to him working 11/7, showing up at 2, taking lunch, working from 4 to 6, and leaving early. He'd do this 3 or 4 times per year. My work used to have vacation and sick leave as 2 separate things. 2 years ago, they created new paid time off that merged sick leave and vacation, but everyone got the same amount of paid time off as their old vacation time. So tons of people just started coming to work sick so they wouldn't waste their vacation time. Now there are tons of people sick all of the time. Overtime is paid in free time instead of money. 3 people quit so far, more people planning to. No new hires to be found. It's probably just a matter of time before this shop closes down. My old job did something similar, but for every hour of work, you got 1 hour of paid leave, so it was better for new parents that could do extra work the days they could, and then get to leave for emergencies and still be paid. People disliked the idea at first until they found out they could work 4 days per week for only 2 hours of extra work per day. We started finding what we called Weekend Wednesday. That way we had a day off in the middle of the week and worked only 2 days in a row. I worked as a graphic designer, by the way, so as long as we were finished on deadline, the boss didn't care. Yep, working on the basis of finished objectives is a terrific way to motivate creative work. I speak from experience, and the better you understand the capacity of your workers, the more efficient objectives you can set. We created this thing called the safety bonus. It was one of 4 possible bonuses people could get. The original version of it said that anyone that was accident-free would get a bonus, so people stopped reporting their accidents. We had to rework it to an accident bonus causing property damage. We set up another safety award for those who filed their safety reports in a timely manner with clear print and full details. IT department changed how work is given out and time is accounted for. Had to fill out daily timesheets that accounted for every 15-minute section of time with a summary of what you've worked on. Anyone that needed IT help had to go through one person. The problem is that the one person giving out work had no clue who had what skills. The timesheets were a waste, we had to stop and report what we were working on. Classic micromanagement. Within months, the entire IT staff left except for one guy. Don't micromanage when the job market is full of other jobs. I worked at a company that blocked every single website except for the one that we used for work. They then hired a new cleaning lady who couldn't speak English. We tried to look up a Spanish to English dictionary, but it was all blocked. This was pre-smartphone as well, so basically she just hung out all day since nobody knew what to have her do or even where the supplies were kept. I work for a large telecom corporation. Corporate HR instituted a new mobile phone and tablet policy for its field techs, which basically stated no electronic devices are to be in the cab of our vehicles. Not even if you're a passenger. When corporate HR sets the rules, they're followed. We even had local supervisors searching the trucks as we left the shop. So no biggie, we follow the rules. As time goes on, supervisors and dispatch get increasingly frustrated that they can't get a hold of their field techs. Go figure. This policy lasted dang near 6 months before they scrapped it. I've got to say it was a glorious 6 months. So peaceful. I was stationed aboard the USS Harry S. Truman from 02 to 05. At one point during the deployment, the Capitan found a candy wrapper in a P-way. What's the obvious solution to finding trash? G-Dunk, snacks and sodas from vending machines were only to be consumed on the mess deck. Anyone caught eating candy anywhere else on the ship would be put on report. Now, it's not like we organized a boycott, but the only reason to buy something from the vending machines would be to eat it elsewhere. If you're going to eat on the mess deck, might as well hit a chow line. 3 days of 0 sales from the machines and the supply officer talked some sense into the captain. I work in a manufacturing facility and wanted my shop supervisors to be more engaging with the operators. The supervisors had a bad habit of paging operators to the blue room, their office, to answer questions. This is obviously not ideal because it pulls an operator off the line and it impacts our efficiency. I sat the supervisors down and explained to them the situation and made it clear I don't want them paging anyone to the blue room anymore. They all nodded their heads and seemed to be agreeing and understanding. Now they page operators to the supervisor office. Work added the option to clock in or out from a mobile app. It lasted maybe 2 weeks. I worked for a tuxedo chain in the US Midwest for years. During prom season a few years back, a new policy in how we answered the phones came through. The greeting was, "Thank you for calling, company name, sales and rental, suits and tuxedos, where we can save you some cha-ching on your prom tuxedo today." Now, say that out loud a few times and realize how much bloody time it takes to say it on the phone each time it rings, all day, every day. Several of us senior managers refused to say it, 1, because it sounded stupid, and 2, because it took an eternity to say and we'd often get interrupted halfway through. Our office would call each store, 16 locations, and make sure you were saying it, and then threatened to fire us if we didn't. Needless to say, we took our defense to the owner of the company and he nixed it pretty quickly. Not quite a workplace, but around 2009 or 10, my city implemented new water-saving laws that said you could only water your lawns on Tuesdays and Thursdays and started enforcing fines on anyone watering their lawn not on the approved days. Well, summer turns to fall, the rainy season hits, and water mains across the city suddenly started bursting. Whatever could be causing this mass failure of our water infrastructure? Local university did a study, and sure enough, the Tuesday and Thursday watering rule had put a massive strain on the water mains and sewer lines and caused them to fail across town. The city's attempt to save water backfired with mass flooding and expensive repairs. At the advice of the university, they switched it to odd numbers water Monday to Wednesday, even numbers water Tuesday, Thursday. It's several years later and they're still repairing the damage in places. We had a new manager that decided everyone had to be in at 9 a.m. and couldn't understand why IT were allowed to come in late. So all came in at 9 a.m. and stopped working evenings and weekends, which meant customer-facing servers being out all weekend because we couldn't be around to fix them. That guy was an idiot though. He told our best salesman to his face he thought he was overpaid, so the salesman promptly resigned, which probably cost the company more than his annual salary in lost sales. Why do guys like this always seem to end up in office management? Is it nepotism? It's nepotism, isn't it? Surely their amount of crazy wrongness can't get through a serious series of interviews. Oh, who am I kidding? Worked at a branch of a credit union. We had to recognize our workers whenever they did something good. Manager made us do this with a stuffed animal whale as if to say, "Whale done." I know. Ugh, like we were kids. Well, we decided to act like children since we were already being treated as such, so 2 weeks later our manager found the whale in the back room, hanging from an extension cord. We have a policy here that any expenditure over $500 must be pre-approved via a series of forms explaining why the thing is needed, with no exceptions. The forms are fairly annoying to fill out, change all the time, and it takes the people who review them quite a while to actually approve or deny your spending. So we all do our damnedest to keep purchases under $500. It's common practice to take one big purchase and just split it into several smaller ones to save the effort of filling out the paperwork. Same money spent, no forms filed. The no exceptions part is also somewhat problematic since it snags routine stuff like printer toner and paper. So we have to waste time filling out the form and they have to waste time reviewing and approving it. I worked at a place that very generously gave us full pay if we missed more than 3 scheduled days in a row due to sickness. The end result was what we called 72-hour flu. Literally no one ever called in for 1 day or 2. If someone was out sick, you could count on seeing them in 3 days' time. As a bit of a background, at my job there are unionized field workers and non-union office workers. I'm one of the latter. Recently, the union guys got a new rule where they're allowed to leave 30 minutes early if they don't take a lunch break. This backfired in 2 ways. First, all of the union guys leave 30 minutes early. It wouldn't really be an issue if some of them stayed until the normal time, but now when something needs to get down during the last 30 minutes of our normal hours, it pretty much ends up being overtime for someone every time. Second, since the union guys don't come back to the building for lunch anymore to clock out, it's been a lot more annoying to coordinate tasks with them if you need them to do something else in the second half of the day. It's little stuff, but it's definitely impacted productivity. Ironically, they still take a lunch break, they just try to pass it off as one of their union-mandated 15-minute breaks. My office is next to the personnel directors, and I hear him have to chew someone out over this almost daily. It's like those guys don't realize that there's a GPS in their truck that shows they were at Taco Bell for 30 minutes. They banned the word triggered, so everyone started saying activated. Get air quality monitoring for any project involving asbestos material. The problem is that we have a lot of projects which involve only a few holes drilled to mount a piece of equipment, and there's already a simple and cheap method which we know negates the risk of asbestos getting released. Forcing us to do air monitoring effectively doubles the cost of those products. It didn't take them long for that policy to get reversed. I worked for a company that met every single issue with a threat of gross misconduct. For those who don't know, gross misconduct gives the company the right to dismiss staff without notice, but that doesn't mean that you can just declare gross misconduct for everything and get out of your obligations. The best one I can remember was when they were having problems with lorries parking in the road outside and tried to get the council to make it no parking. The council duly came and took a look and noted that several cars belonging to employees were parked on the road, so, you guessed it, parking in the road, off the company's property, and perfectly legally was to be treated as gross misconduct. There were many other examples, probably one a month, none of which were ever executed. It got so that the whole thing became a joke and nobody took anything they said seriously.
What happens to people after they win long-term prizes in competitions? A neighbor won $500 a week for life. He quit his job, divorced his wife, and moved into a small apartment across town where the rent was cheap, and now he almost never leaves. He has everything delivered to his house from Amazon. Living the dream. My older cousin won $5,000 a month for life. It ruined him. He got all paranoid about people only wanting to be around him because he had money. We live in a rural, fairly low-wage area, so that's a lot of money to some people. If you ever mentioned it to him, he just stopped talking to you. He's pretty much a loner now with almost nothing to show for it. That's kinda scary. Why doesn't he move? This is where his mother lives, and he's not the type to venture out into the world. One of my friends won a $5,000 a week for life prize in the New York lottery a few years back. It's actually only for 40 years, but that's plenty of time to save for retirement and live a long, happy life. He's doing well because he isn't acting like a lotto winner. It's as if it was the Social Security he was receiving previously. He's disabled. He still has his friends, too. It pretty much went as best as possible. I once won a year of free groceries. They gave me 52 $100 gift cards to use any way I wanted. I was single and ate and drank like a gosh darn king that year. Nobody went hungry when I was around. I won free toilet paper for a family for life, which is $62 a month. I give them to a homeless shelter.
Do you give it to them because it's full of bums?
Web developer here. I made a website for a local pizza chain. The owner paid me, then asked for support. I gave him a price, $75 an hour, and he suggested free pizza for life instead. I took it. I've enjoyed excellent quality free pizza about 10 times since 2006. He's had me do about an hour's worth of maintenance. I just walk into one of his stores, order a pie, and when they ask for payment, I say, "Call Tom." They do, they talk, and then they hand me the pizza. It's kind of cool, actually. It sounds like it's only free pizza for you for Tom's life. Once he dies, they'll have no way to confirm it's free. Well, that story was written 9 years ago, so I'm not sure if Tom's pizza chain is still going. Honestly, good on the developer for not fully taking advantage of the place. I won free movies from Blockbuster for a year. It ended up only being one rental per week. After a couple of weeks, I realized it was just a coupon for one free rental and I used it as often as I needed. Eventually, I modded my original Xbox and started renting multiple games a day and copying them to my hard drive. I killed the Blockbuster. I once won a year's supply of calendars from a local gift shop. They gave me one calendar worth $2.99.
That's frickin' brilliant.
I got, quote, free pizza for a year. 12 pizzas. I got 12 pizzas. It was about a month ago and I've used around 4 of them already. It's not gonna last a year. I got free Oreos for life. I won an Oreo stacking contest when I was 10. I'm 21 now and glad to say that I don't have diabetes. I won free bagels from a bagel shop for a year. It was good for 13 bagels, 2 loaves of bread, and 2 tubs of cream cheese and spread each month. I tried 3 different locations and none of the managers believed that the voucher I won was legitimate at their store. They all gave me different reasons for why they wouldn't accept my voucher.
Okay, this one makes me angry. Like, what the frick? They probably throw out more spoiled product than that every day and they won't honor your damn coupon?
I won a year's supply of dog food when I was 10 and tried to convince my mum that it was the perfect time to finally get a dog, as it must be a sign. We didn't get a dog. I gave the vouchers to my neighbor. My parents were in the first 50 people at a new car wash place and got a free car wash for life. I'm convinced your parents are unknowingly partaking in a laundering scheme. The car wash is a front to launder money, but they need to make it look like people use the car wash in order to report high cash incomes. So they give out vouchers for free car washes to make it look like they have a lot of customers, but really they're just stuffing the registers with dirty substance money. Apparently, I made a Breaking Bad reference, but I haven't got that far yet. I'm only on season 2. Thanks for the spoilers. I entered a radio competition in the 90s for free music every month for a year. I didn't win that, but I won the consolation prize, which was a copy of Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill. We already had a copy of Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill, by the way. A rep from the station told me they'd mail it out on the 15th. Well, it arrived, but it never stopped arriving. On the 15th of every month, a copy of Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill would show up in the mail. This happened till we had about 6 copies of Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill. I called and asked the radio station if they could send something else besides Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill, but they did not. They just corrected their error. Later that year, my sister got a birthday present from one of her friends. When she opened it, it was a copy of Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill. I won free iced coffees for a year from Dunkin' Donuts, but instead they sent $500 in gift cards. I'm not mad. Interestingly enough, my girlfriend also won the exact same contest. 3-day contest, and she won the first day and I won the third and final day. 1 free scoop of ice cream a week from the local ice cream place. This was for winning an ice cream eating contest. Yum! A family friend frantically brought a scratch off while fleeing a road rage driver. She was telling the clerk to call the police on a parked car that had followed her to the gas station. She now gets $3,000 a week and works because she wants to, not because she has to. Every gift she gives now comes with a lotto ticket. Last week I went in to buy a specific lottery number for like $2, but then the guy ended up saying something that I couldn't quite hear, that I agreed to. He printed me off like one of every lotto ticket. It cost me over $20. I was positive that I would win though, because I never intended on buying the ticket, and that's exactly when I feel like you'd have the highest chance. I lost it all. £40,000 per year for life on a £10 National Lottery scratch card. It was that or $1 million up front. I just turned 21 at the time, so my dad made me take the annuity because I'd just spunk the $1 million in a couple of years left to my own devices. Now it's good. I take care of my mortgage every year, so my salary is just for me and my family. We get a nice couple of holidays a year, but we don't live to excess. 27 years old now, so we'll see if I reach over 1 million over the next 40 or 50 or 60 years. My friend won free lunch for a year at a school fundraiser, but he had to enter in his account number so they could at least document it. He was promptly given a limit on how much he could have. My neighbor won $1,000 a week for life on a lottery scratch-off ticket. I haven't seen him around recently, but he lived at his childhood home with his parents for a while and owned 2 Corvettes. He also loved dogs and would always stop me to pet my dog when I would walk by. He was always a nice guy who seemed to be smart with his winnings. I won a year of free Uber, the on-demand car service for those unaware, for pretty much all of 2014. I used it a lot, to and from work, the airport, in many different cities, took my friends out to the bars, to the beach, anywhere, met a lot of interesting drivers. Paid taxes on it this year because it counted as income, but it was definitely worth it. The contest was at a college bowl game that Uber sponsored. I had to catch the most passes in 35 seconds, which were thrown to me from NFL WR Tavern Austin. I beat my opponent by 1 catch. I received a fixed amount of Uber credit per month, so it was actual cash value that counted as income. Hence I received a $10.99 MISC. However, I was glad to pay the tax considering the value I received. The narrator wonders if you'd be taxed regardless of how much you actually used it if you're just being given credit per month. I guess you could just make a point of taking an Uber everywhere. Screw fitness and fresh air. I won a year's supply of Nestlé sweets and chocolates in a quiz on the radio when Toy Story 2 came out. You had to answer 3 questions about Toy Story, then you got entered into a draw to either go to Space Camp in Cape Canaveral or Cowboy Camp in Arizona, but you got the chocolate for just getting on the radio. I got the 3 questions right, but some other kid won the draw. Then the chocolate just arrived in one big shipment. Huge boxes of it. It was literally incredible. Then my mum made me bring it into school and share it out amongst everyone in my year. A few kilos of chocolate and I hardly saw any of it. Ungrateful little jerks ate it all in minutes. I'm still bitter. My family won free KFC for a year when I was in the 8th grade. We got a 30-piece family bucket each month, but had to pay for everything else. It was pretty decent. A grocery store chain had a "Win a year's worth of bananas" contest a couple of years ago. I had to watch a video about how they store their bananas and then answer a question. I thought, what the hell, my kid loves bananas, and entered. And I won. They sent me a gift card for the equivalent of a year's worth of bananas. $300. We spent most of it on meat. Totally worth it. I feel like maybe you won because you were the only one who entered. The sister of my friend won a car when she got a special Oreo in a packet. You could win different prizes depending on what your special Oreo said, like trip or car or whatever. Nabisco came to our school, we had a big pep rally thing, they gave the girl, who was like 13, a new VW Beetle filled with packages of Oreos. Everyone at the school got a pack of double stuff Oreos. They'd just come out. It was awesome. The girl's parents sold the car and started a college fund. Anyone who went around to visit got tons of free Oreos. I think they eventually just donated hundreds of packets to a food bank. That's a pretty awesome story. Most people who win cars full of food just end up in a car crash and with diabetes. Free Chick-fil-A for a year. Just had to be one of the first 100 people at a new store. It's pretty good. Yes, they do this at every Chick-fil-A, and no, I'm not in your city. I read an article for college about lottery winners in Sweden, and gosh darn does it sound difficult on your social life. Friends of the winners felt like if they were buying food and looking for deals, or being sensible with their money, that they should relax and not worry too much. You have loads of money. Also, that the winners should pay for the meals and drinks just because they were better off. But the kicker was, when the lottery winners spent too much on something or did anything out of the ordinary with the winnings, their friends told them not to be careless with the money and to smarten up. Basically, a vicious circle for the winners where they were doomed if they do and doomed if they don't. Any similar experiences for lotto winners out there? Simple solution, just make sure you don't have any friends. I'm almost there. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Every now and then I get lucky enough to be the 1 millionth visitor to a website. I'm still waiting to collect around 30 iPads. I have a friend who won the Set for Life Scratch and Win Lotto. You get $1,000 a week, tax-free for 25 years. So yeah, about $52,000 per year. It's a 1 in 880,000 chance to win. He was offered a lump sum of $1 million, $300,000 less than the total prize over time, and he turned that down. He went to school for a few years until he was basically sick of it all. These days, he just spends his time drawing anime. He doesn't leave his house. He doesn't want to hang out with anyone, and he seems to just whittle away his money on impulse Amazon purchases. He has another 15 years or so worth of the lottery. He's been unemployed for the last 10 years. When he runs out of money, everyone pretty much sees that he will be royally screwed. My grandfather won the lottery for $2 million. He died 2 years later to prostate cancer. My mum was the recipient for the remaining 18 years of $80,000 a year after taxes. That time period has now expired. When I was younger, my brother won a 7-Up bottle cap contest which either allowed you to appear on TV or get a pair of 7-Up boxers. He chose the boxers. Good choice. TV is for suckers. I won the boxers too and they never came in. I just frickin' remembered right now. Not me, but my brother was hit by a car when he was 7 and my parents had a killer insurance policy on him. He gets $7,000 a month for the rest of his life and got $1.2 million when he was 25. Since he was 15, he's been addicted to smack, been in jail 6 times for violent crimes, one of which very nearly killed a guy, and has 5 children with 5 different mothers. Because of the kids, he pays almost all of his settlement money in child support every month and has to work as a dishwasher at a crappy diner to get by. The $1.2 million was spent long ago on substances, cars he destroyed, and parties he threw for his friends. A friend of an acquaintance won $2,000 a week for 20 years or something. He spends it mostly on smack. His smack dealer is the real winner. No taxes at all. In middle school, I was in a science class that won a contest for free M&Ms. The teacher got all of our information to make sure we all got our share after it got sorted out. As it was approaching summer break, none of us ever got our M&Ms, and I can only assume the teacher ate them all himself and won himself some diabetes. Years after World War II, the German government began paying reparations of sorts to victims' families for the atrocities that had befallen certain people. I don't know what it used to be, but once a year we get something like $14 in the mail. It's a bit odd. I'm not sure this can be considered a win on balance given what your family had to go through to be awarded this $14 per year. Good lord. Also, apparently the German government pays out billions per year this way in total. Who knew? I won free Applebee's for a year, which turned out to be $600 in gift cards. Kinda lame, spent most of it on beer. Free beer is never lame, young grasshopper. I mean, it's better than the food at Applebee's. You remember when Snapple had that Win Nothing promotion? I was with my girlfriend at a restaurant and opened one. Under the cap it said, "You win, no thirst." I thought to myself, duh, I'm drinking one right now. I thought it was a gag, tossed the bottle and went home. But for some reason it bugged me. I looked it up online and sure enough, I'd won a lifetime supply of Snapple, and my clueless butt threw away that cap. If it makes you feel any better, I threw away a nice LCD-sized screen in the McDonald's trash. It was a World Cup promotion in Germany in 2006. You had to have 2 tickets. One had the left half, the other had the right half. I had one half and the new ticket was the other half. I thought it was the same half I had, so I pitched it. It wasn't the same half. I still have the other half of the winning pair sitting on my bookshelf to remind me of the one and only time I ever won anything, and I threw it away. Years ago, M&Ms were having a contest where you could win something like $10,000 a year for the rest of your life if you opened a special pack of M&Ms. I was at work one day, opened a pack of peanut M&Ms at my desk. They had bits of other color shells stuck to the outside of all the candies. I looked at them, thought to myself, this is weird, and then ate them and threw the package away. In the next couple of days, I saw a commercial letting me know I'd screwed myself out of some serious cash. The girl sat across from me thought it was hilarious. My question is, did I lose my one chance at something glorious, or is there something still in the cards for me? I remember there being an M&M's contest when I was a kid, where if you found one grey M&M in your bag, you would win some astronomical amount of money, or something like that. My brother and I informed our dad, and the 3 of us promptly went to the corner store to pick up a couple of bags. We were chowing down on our M&Ms and keeping a sharp eye out for any grey pieces. Suddenly, my dad holds one up and says, "Oh look, a grey one." My brother and I promptly lose our minds until Dad goes, looks pretty tasty though. He pops it into his mouth. The sound of the grey M&M crunching between his teeth sounds distinctly like the shattering of our dreams. His maniacal cackling was drowned out by our distraught wails. Turns out if you suck the food coloring off the brown M&Ms, they turn grey. Monster Energy was having a competition at my college, and they were for some reason having it at the new dorms that hadn't opened yet. Well, I happened to be touring the dorms on room selection day and had a nice conversation with the guys at the table about Fallout 3, which had come out 5 months prior. Because I killed their loneliness, they gave me about 100 entries into a contest for free Monster Energy for a year. Well, only about 30 or so people had entered at that point, so I figured why the heck not, and filled them all out right there. Of course, I won, but the catch was we got all the monsters at once. So I was given 365 cans of Monster. Things did not go well from there. I drank myself sick on Monster just because it was free, and the school's tap was horrible. One of my roommates drank so much Monster that he had heart palpitations and had to go to the emergency room. We did make some awesome can pyramids though, which was pretty fun. I won a year's worth of chocolate. I'm not a huge fan of chocolate, I'm more of a savory person myself, so I was expecting my winnings to last well over a year. It ended up lasting less than a month. Everyone kept taking a few bars here and there thinking I wouldn't notice, since there was so much. By the time I actually went to get some for myself, there were 2 bars and a pack of hot chocolate mix left. I didn't win anything, but I am now getting my pension. That, with my savings, gives me a budget of just over $100,000 per year. Just under $2,000 per week. So far, it's great. No more commute and no more bullcrap meetings. I can sleep in as long as I want, get on Reddit as much as I want, and pretty much do whatever I want within reason. Basically, it tastes like freedom. I never thought I'd get to tell the internet this story. I won a lifetime supply of butt lubricant from a local adult shop near my hometown. My girlfriend and I were visiting from our home on the coast of the state in which I live. We drove past the shop and I remarked that I remembered when it was a tiny store only about 800 square feet in size. It's huge now, easily more than 6,000 square feet. She remarked that she'd never been inside and was genuinely curious. We went in and looked around for a while, and a cute girl behind the counter asked if we had entered their yearly prize drawing. Nope, we entered our information. A few months go by and I'd long since forgotten about it. I got an email and a voicemail message one day telling me I won a lifetime supply of CleanStream water-based lubricant. It turns out you get 1 8-ounce tube each month. You must pick it up in the store, but if you can't make it to the store that month, you can call or email and request it to be put on hold until you can try to make it by there. Until my girlfriend and I broke up, I was making great use of the stuff since she enjoyed doing the deed that particular way. Now though, we've been broken up about 3 months and I have 7 full bottles of this stuff that need to get used. I'm gonna have to start dating again, I guess. I mean, it's probably gonna be a good line on the first date. So, I won a lifetime supply of this stuff. Not me, but during the time of the Vietnam War, my grandfather was convinced by some shady dude to buy a stake in an apartment building. Fast forward to today, and he gets $350,000 in the mail per year from the building, which is apparently doing very well. My grandfather has to do absolutely nothing in return. Pretty sweet deal. I get free burritos for a year from Moe's and it's still going strong. I know I didn't win it per se, but the way I got it was by waiting in line for 3.5 hours to be one of the first 50 customers. I had to go away to school, so I haven't really been able to use the pass that much, but when I've been home, I've eaten a lot of burritos. I've won free petrol for life and it's been amazing so far. There was a new McDonald's opening up around campus and they offered free Big Macs for a year to the first 100 people there. 1 free Big Mac per week. A bunch of my friends and I got up at 3 a.m. to go wait in line for our Big Mac vouchers. It's currently week 28 and we all want to die, but we have to use them. We're poor college students, damn it. My dad won a year of free Great Harvest bread, which amounted to 1 loaf of bread per week. It was delicious. Well, I brought a $1 scratch ticket and I keep winning my dollar back. Every time I go to the gas station, I use it to buy another $1 ticket and I keep winning it back. So there's that. When I was working at a pizza place, we had a guest who got free pizza for life. But he didn't win it, he earned it. Our store was robbed and as he was just pulling up to pick up his pizza, he noticed what was going on inside and didn't leave his car. So when the robber drove off, he followed him and got his license plate number and then came back to the store so he could give it to the police. The robber was arrested with all the money and even the checks addressed to our pizza shop still in his car. The guest got free pizza for life. He only came once a month or so, though I don't think there was even a limit on it. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.